Okay, I'd like to call to order the Malibu City Council regular meeting of June 11, 2018. May I have a roll call?
Councilmember Lamont.
Here.
Councilmember Peak.
In the house.
Councilmember Rosenthal.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
Here.
Mayor Mullen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Lester Tobias, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Lester. Could I have a closed session report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the Council, tonight's regular meeting convened at 6 o'clock, at which time the Council recessed to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1. The Council discussed the item that was listed on the posted agenda, and tonight took no reportable action. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. May I have an approval of the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a report on the posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on June 1st, 2018, with the amended agenda posted on June 5th, 2018.
Thank you. And we have no ceremonial presentations. And we're on to 2A, which is communications from the public concerning matters which are not on the agenda for which City Council has subject matter jurisdiction. City Council may not act on these matters except to refer matters to staff or schedule matters for a future agenda. Catherine Brickman, you're the first speaker. And you're doing a commission report before we do these public speakers.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and City Council. So you're going to receive some anthologies and Poet Summit, Laureate Summit programs, which I'll talk about. So I'm here tonight, just for everyone to know, for an Arts Commission update. So the current art exhibition is the Dan Eldon Journey is the Destination, which began in February and has been well attended. We received many enthusiastic comments. The partnership between the city and the nonprofit Creative Visions has been very positive. In addition to the exhibition, we've partnered with them to bring programs, screenings, lectures to City Hall 2 to 3 times a month. Creative Visions and the city will jointly host a closing reception on June 29th, beginning at 6:30. We would like to invite you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, and everyone in the community to attend this lovely event. The next exhibition going in comes from Malibu High School. We're very proud to present local works by young emerging talent from our Malibu High School. The next City Hall exhibition will include over 35 pieces of artwork from the senior class. We anticipate this opening in mid-July. The Poet Laureate program has been very busy, and we are very, very proud of this program. The Poet Laureate Committee continues to meet monthly. As part of the Malibu Library Speakers Series, the Commission and the Poet Laureate Committee organized the first Malibu Poetry Summit on Saturday, May 19th, presented here in Council Chambers with a reception that followed in the multipurpose room. It included our Poet Laureate, Mr. Ricardo Means Ibarra, as well as Poet Laureates from West Hollywood, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County, and young emerging artists. We also incorporated the Visiting Artist Program. Local resident and international artist Ivo Spirov and children from Mrs. Levy's 4th and 5th grade class at Juan Cabrillo Elementary School created a backdrop for the event. And you can see those behind me on the walls, and those are the graffiti walls that the kids did with Ivo. And Ivo also did a commission piece custom for the city, which is very beautiful. Ricardo completed the poetry portion of the Arts and Education program in May with 4th and 5th grade students at Juan Cabrillo Elementary School. The poems completed in workshop will be part of the Pizza and Poetry program. Poems will be placed on pizza boxes earlier this summer. And now the anthology that all of you should have. This year, the Poet Laureate Committee welcomed and fostered a relationship with Pepperdine University's Poetry Society and the Humanities Division. As a result, Pepperdine University agreed to fund the printing of the second edition of the student anthology that we did one last year as well. We have included poems from all of Ricardo's workshops at Malibu High School and Juan Cabrillo Elementary School, as well as Pepperdine's student poems. The anthology has over 90 poems and multiple examples of student artwork. We are very proud of our partnership with Pepperdine University and hope we can continue to produce an annual anthology with their assistance. Arts and Education program continues to grow. This academic year, there were 2 visual artists, 1 feature film animator, Joe Sishta, who worked with the students to create their own animated pieces, which I will send to each of you. I hope you do take the time to look at them because they're really wonderful. 3 musicians, 1 photographer, 1 director, 1 actor, 1 author, and our Poet Laureate. I couldn't be more proud to help grow this program. The artists living in our community who participate so generously with their time and talents and their mentorship are priceless. So an extra special thank you for funding this program. The Poetry Stones at Legacy Park. The Commission has reviewed and recommended approving the addition of Poetry Stones at Legacy Park. 1 stone commemorates the city's first Poet Laureate and will include a portion of Ricardo's poem, America, which was read at last year's concert on the Bluffs. The 2nd stone is a student poem, a student's poem who graduated from Juan Cabrillo Elementary School and captures the meaning of why poetry is so important. And finally, the art utility boxes. The Commission approved a recommendation to begin art utility box program earlier this year. As of now, staff is reviewing the program with the Public Works Department. The program will be presented to the Commission again later this month. Then it will be presented to Council this summer for your final approval. And before I leave, I'd like to call up Nell Brickman, who is one of the student poets that we worked with. And we'll conclude with our Poet Laureate. Okay, do you want help? Can you get that to go down? That's better. Okay, I'll stand everything. Put your poem right there. Say my name's Nell.
My name's Nell. Letter to a cat. You are gray, you are fluffy. Why don't you like dogs? Why don't dogs like you? What is your name? You smell like lemons. I wish I had a cat like you. Sometimes I want to be a cat like you by now.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
Council, hello. So we had an incredible event here. We called it Call to the Wall. And we had the Poet Laureates you heard from Santa Barbara, Ventura, West Hollywood, and then there was myself and emerging poets. It was incredible. There was the artwork that the students painted with Evo, which you see those 2 walls behind me. We had some surfboards here, you know, to bring up, to recall our iconic wall there at First Point. And I wrote a poem called Call to the Wall, of course, to welcome everyone to this event and reading, and I wanted to share that with you. Why not? So, Call to the Wall. It was the darkest time of winter and night across the desert. Harassed by a surly, malignant fog leaning over the windshield, cursed by owls and truck drivers perched high, bent on delivery. We turned off the useless headlights and burrowed up to the rims in an arroyo of discarded ballads and accordions. Who knew when we crossed? There were no guards, just the 3 of us and a border collie named Rhea, searching for that perfect wave in a 63 VW Bug, once painted the color of Dixon, Ticonderoga #2. The color of yellow of a late afternoon sun on a mythic wall, on a weathered map drawn in pencil to a secret break in the north, past the empire of Hollywood. All this happened after the burning and the floods and the mass shootings, before we found the lost poets painting a wall of memory and friendship at the lagoon of endless nose rides, godwits, kooks, and pelicans. A wall to welcome you, to celebrate and talk story around the fire circle, to howl with the waves, coyotes, our ancestors, to hear your words. Thank you. And thank you for supporting the arts and the Poetry Commission. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. It's always great to have the Poet Laureate come down here and visit us. And thank you, Catherine. And especially thank you, Nell. That was awesome poem. Thank you very much for coming down. And I probably should have made it clear we wanted to get them in first so that Nell could do her poem before she had to wait for everybody else. So appreciate everyone's patience there. Thanks very much. All right, next we're back to public comment now, actually. And the first one up is Gary A. Smith. Gary will be followed by Lance Simmons, and Lance will be followed by Dana with no last name.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilmen and women. My name is Gary Smith. I'm an attorney. I'm here in my official capacity tonight because I have the privilege of representing Jefferson Wagner. As you know, on May 31st, search warrants were served at Mr. Wagner's residences and business by investigators of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. No charges have been filed, and the case remains under investigation. At this time, I don't believe he's done anything that would merit the filing of charges, but I can tell you that Mr. Wagner has been and remains cooperative with the investigation. Mr. Wagner is deeply appreciative of the outpouring of support of all kinds from the community where he's been an iconic figure for decades. I speak to this from personal knowledge as a resident of Malibu for 25 years and a frequent exchanger of friendly elbows with Mr. Wagner on Wednesday nights at the high school open basketball. Mr. Wagner would prefer to tell you these things himself. But as I'm sure you can understand and appreciate, he has reluctantly agreed to follow my advice and refrain from making any statements during an ongoing investigation until the matter concludes. I don't believe we're going to have any further public comments about this thing. But we do want to thank you all for your patience, your understanding, and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Lance, you're next.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. My name is Lance Simmons. I'm a resident of Malibu. In a previous life, however, I spent over 4 decades in politics and public policy, and in senior level positions at all levels of government. Federal government, I've served for 2 presidents, 2 United States senators, 2 governors, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the U.S. Senate Budget Committee. I've been around the block. I know politics and I know policy. I'm the author of 2 books on politics and policy and over 700 published articles and op-eds in newspapers all across the country. I believe firmly in the positive and constructive role that governmental leaders and governmental institutions can play in advancing society. However, what I see in the current political climate, the current political environment, is an insidious degree of corruption within and public cynicism toward government at all levels, and it saddens me. I am particularly concerned about recent events here in Malibu that have been reported in the local newspaper regarding the appearance of intimidation and potential corruption with respect to City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem Jefferson Wagner. If such accusations prove to be true, we run the risk of having the residents of Malibu fall prey to suspicion of its leaders and government institutions. It is extremely important for this City Council to do all in its power to get to the bottom of this. I ask each of you, who is absolutely indignant to such suggestions? Show of hands. You should all be outraged. I don't see one hand raised. There's one. Let the record note that Jefferson Wagner raised his hand. This is outrageous. And I would like to ask this city council to support a thorough investigation into these allegations. I've got a second request. Has there been a refutation of reported incidents? Has any entity, legal, law enforcement, or other stepped forward to dispute the events that have been reported? Call on this city council to convey in the strongest possible way the importance of looking into this issue and report back to the citizens of this community your findings as soon as possible. This issue is vitally important to your credibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Dana, you're next. Dana will be followed by Walt Keller, who has 4 minutes, with Lucille giving a minute.
Good evening. My name is Dana Christensen. Hello, City Council members. I expected to learn a little more before I got called on to speak, but I guess I'm just here to say that I'm in support of Jefferson Wagner and whatever that means, whatever that requires. And I suppose, though, it got me in the car driving down here was all this publicity, I guess I'll call it bad publicity, and really pretty much the sound of crickets from the council. And I thought it'd be good to hear something from everybody about what's happening up there, or what has happened up there. So I think I pretty much, Lance covered everything pretty well too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana. Walt Keller. Walt will be followed by Deborah Frankel.
Good evening, council members. I'm Walt Keller, and you've run into me before, but I think I'm here tonight on one of the most important, crucial things to our community, and that is I'm asking you all to unanimously send a letter to the district attorney's office reciting what's happened to a resident of our community and asking her to investigate the behavior of the whole thing. You might also include a reference to the 2 articles in the local newspaper reciting how it went on and showing the photos of the police officers all over the place. I understand they even had a what do you call it, a squad prepared for major attacks of pistols. But anyway, that's my big point. Please do send a letter demanding an investigation of the whole thing and an investigation of the behavior of the officers of our court. I might note, since I still have a little time left, that way back when I was first running for city council, I had a knock on the door one morning, and a gentleman flashed a badge at me and said he was from the state attorney's general office investigating a crime that I had committed in an election. And the bottom line was that as soon as I showed him that this was a totally false claim, he smiled and left. I don't think that's what was the proper behavior for the local district attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Walt. Deborah Keller. Excuse me, Deborah Frankel. Deborah, you'll be followed by Linda Vallejo, who gets 6 minutes.
Hi, I'm back again. Same. I'm just here for Jefferson, and I think that we all need to do whatever we can for him. And this is seriously uncool and not what should be happening in Malibu. I just wanted to join. Thanks.
Linda Vallejo. Linda will be followed by Tedville.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I think you know me well enough that I go straight to the heart of the matter. I'm here to discuss the Malibu City government. With the exception of Jefferson Wagner, you are all an embarrassment to the city of Malibu. Word on the street, actually more than word on the street, is that you all folded like paper clips after receiving a phone call from Antonio Villagrosa, pressuring you to ratify Reva Feldman's contract. What followed was an attempted character assassination, a brutal degradation, and a raid by the DA's office on Jefferson Wagner because he refused to fold and be intimidated. Not a word addressing this issue came from any of you. You gave new meaning to the movie title, Silence of the Lambs. Mayor Mullen, I thank you for your service as a fireman. I'm a big fan of firemen. When people are running away from a fire, most firemen are running into the fire. I think you got confused and ran in the wrong direction, away from the fire with all your buddies. Finally, you sent the least credible member, Laura Rosenthal, to do your job. I guess she's your new press secretary. As mayor, you should have been the voice of Malibu. You should have been the mouthpiece. Instead, you all hid behind a woman's skirt. I don't know how you can even look at Jefferson. I'm embarrassed for you. Laura, you chose to make that unbelievable statement saying you were shocked at the news and the city had nothing to do with it. Are we to believe that none of you knew about this investigation beforehand? Laura, we are well aware that you lead this all-male posse that is now circling the drain. Skylar, I'm pretty sure that Montecito and where you live in Kauai is a little bit more than 440 feet from the city limits. Could you be the next raid, or have they already paid you a visit? Lulamont, you ran like a teenage girl running to a sale at Forever 21. I find it interesting that Antonio Villagrosa's sister is a judge for the LA Superior Court. Is that a coincidence? I have worked with Jefferson in the movie industry, and his reputation there and in the city is flawless. This is a scenario that could have very well happened that morning. He could have been preparing his weapons for a movie job when law enforcement arrived. They could have shot him on sight, even if the guns were fake, and fixed the narrative later. And I am a big fan of law enforcement because my family's in law enforcement. Let this sink in. You are all complicit by your cowardly silence. Could it be that there's much more city corruption lying beneath this issue? I am a firm believer in all my investigations that there is always a paper trail, even if you try to scrub the emails. That you follow the money and that you look for the skeletons in the closets. I am appalled by your cowardice and lack of compassion for a man who has faithfully served this community for years. But I want to thank each and every one of you for showing us who you really are. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Linda Vallejo. Ted Bell, you are next. And following Ted will be John Mazza, and then after John will be Lester Tobias, who gets 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Ted Vale, Big Rock. I've lived in Malibu for 44 years. Have known Zuma J for most of those years. I supported him in all his runs for the city council and served with him on the board of the Malibu Adamson House Foundation, where he's a long-serving and valuable member. He has shown his love for Malibu for many years. And as a former federal prosecutor, I've found the Gestapo-like tactics of the people who raided him and his lady to be a gross overreach. So if you want to do anything, I have a few questions for you. Who was the complainant who caused the search warrant to be issued? That's question one. Question two, did it have anything to do with the fact that the search warrant was issued on the same day as Zuma J was the sole city council member dissenting on the 3-year extension of the contract of city manager Reva Feldman at a salary higher than that of the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti? Did it have anything to do with the fact that Zuma J was a strong and vocal critic of the effort by Joe Edmiston to place a public park on a private road in the Sycamore Park area of the city of Malibu, done without any approvals from the city of Malibu? Did it have anything to do with the fact that Zuma J was a vocal critic of the 82-acre Bluffs Park land swap deal with Joe Edmiston to trade the city's 532-acre Charmley Park Wilderness Park for this 82-acre Bluffs Park? And did it have anything to do with the fact that Reva Feldman worked for Joe Edmiston for many years before she came to work with the city of Malibu? Those are some questions you might consider if you want to pursue this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. John Mazza will be followed by Lester Tobias.
Good evening. I'm a firm believer in innocent until proven guilty, even if you're not charged. So I'm not going to comment at all on Jefferson's situation, other than the fact that it isn't right anywhere, especially Malibu, but South Central LA, Harlem, wherever, to roust people and roust their house and overkill with cops. There was no way that anybody needed 6 or 8 policemen to check out a shed. There's no way that it takes paddy wagons or whatever those wagons were and all those people in 5 hours to just look for something, especially when it's basically a nonviolent situation. And I do agree with several other speakers that the city should protest the fact that this kind of police action isn't warranted anytime, anywhere. Now, possibly if somebody's shooting machine guns at you, maybe yes, but not at that time of the morning in Malibu over this issue. So I do ask the city council to look at and ask the district attorney why this could happen to a citizen of Malibu. I know the city has borders, but Malibu is Malibu. The Malibu Township Council covers all of Malibu. We don't care where lines are, and cities, of course, have to. But we are a community, and when we know somebody for 30, 40 years and we know their character, that's all we need to know. But we do need to know that we're safe in our homes and we do not have essentially the County of Los Angeles Gestapo banging on our door. So you don't have to comment, as far as I'm concerned, on anything to do with this case other than the way it was handled by the district attorney's office. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lester Tobias. Lester will be followed by Don Schmitz.
Before I start, I have a very quick question. Reva, is the Caltrans representative here tonight? I heard he was going to be here. Skylar asked you to see if he could come. You said you were going to check. I'm just curious before I start.
They're not here tonight.
Okay.
We're going to put them on the agenda for June 25th and notice it so people can attend accordingly.
Okay, so my public comments have a lot to do with that, but I do want to start with a very quick story. This morning, I was down in the basement dealing with geology and environmental health, and Matt the Englishman came out and said, "Hey, so what's going on with Jay?" I said, "I don't really know. I don't know. The big frustration is we don't even know who issued this warrant." But I said, I think it's about a residential thing, because in Malibu, before we were a city, everybody that lived out in Montecito and everything, we were all Malibu, and then we became a city and they drew a line and one of his houses is maybe, I don't know, outside the line. And Carl comes out and he goes, "Oh, so he's existing non-conforming." So that works for me. We do that with houses. We can do that with Jay, but, I'm just bring a little levity to the deal. Now, here's what I really want to get to. This is a Public Works memo issued last Wednesday to the Malibu Beach Inn from Public Works, from Rob. And I don't know if you guys, I want to know, show of hands, has anybody seen this memo? Came out Wednesday. Basically says they cannot recommend approval at this time. Has anybody seen it? You don't even know. So you don't even know this stuff is happening. And I was hoping the Caltrans guy was here to see if he'd even seen it. But he hasn't. So it's got 4 reasons, and number 4 is the reason this is never going to get approved, okay? It says the City of Malibu, PCH safety study dated May 18th, 2015 identified uncontrolled lefts along the highway as a contributing factor to collisions along the highway. The proposed valet service will result in creating uncontrolled left turns to and from PCH. The applicant would need to address how this will be resolved. I'm going to show you how this is never going to be resolved. If you take a look up at the slide presentation, here's the slide looking at the Malibu Inn in the lower left, and then you can see the Hertz thing up up at the center. Okay. Now, if a customer's using the Malibu Beach Inn, driving in, using the inn, and leaving, okay, what you've got is two traffic interface moves. There's an unprotected left-hand turn against traffic to get in, and there is a right-hand turn to get out. That's if they're coming from the east. Now, if they're coming from the west, they have a right turn in, and then they either are going to try to pull a crazy left to get home across 2 lanes of traffic and a stacking lane, or they're going to pull out into traffic, drive till they can get into the stacking lane, and then whip a U-turn. So you've got 2 moves in one case, 3 moves in another. Now, if you add off-site valet parking to this, okay, you have a right turn out onto the PCH. You have to get into the stacking lane within 75 feet. You have to make a left turn unprotected against traffic. Then to get the car, you've got to make a right turn out into traffic, the same 75 feet to get into the stacking lane, and then another unprotected left turn to get into the inn. Oh, and let's add a freaking crosswalk, okay? So this will never happen. Why you guys aren't telling Caltrans to rescind this stupid crosswalk is beyond me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester Tobias. Don Schmitz will be followed by Ann Ellis, and Ann will be followed by Lynn Norton.
Evening, council members. My name is Don Schmitz. I'm here on behalf of a number of the property owners on Point Doom. We were in front of the Planning Commission last week, and they were deliberating on a very worthy project, which they're going to approve, which is the replacement of the vertical access way on Point Doom Park, which is overdue. The existing access way is dilapidated. It's a public safety problem. And it's going to be a beautiful amenity both to the state park system and to our community. However, the neighbors have a bona fide concern as it pertains to the parking anarchy which has occurred out there on the parking lot, which is part of the street. It's posted. It's supposed to be closed at sunset and open up at sunrise, and the parking is only supposed to be for 2 hours. You'll see a series of pictures there in regards to people that have been illegally parking, including going in there after hours. I would not be representing the neighbors if they were trying to stop or impede this worthy project, but we are looking for solutions. We testified to the Planning Commission in regards to putting in a parking gate, and Craig Sapp, the superintendent for LA County District for State Park, suggested on the outlet side as opposed to a second gate putting in the gator teeth, which I think is an enlightened suggestion. However, the Planning Commission did not concur in regards to conditioning the project to have the gate and the gator teeth so that it could be closed during the nighttime. And in actuality, you know, the commissioners have some pretty good reasons for that. But they are accordingly adopting a second resolution at their hearing next week, recommending that this council direct Public Works to move forward with alacrity on incorporating the gate and the gator teeth so that they can control the access to the parking lot. The conundrum is the timing. And I'm sure you would understand that the neighbors feel like this is their opportunity to effectuate this incorporation of the gate to control the access so the parking lot can be properly closed during the nighttime hours. I'm trying to avoid an appeal to this council. In actuality, state parks, the city bureaucracy, and the neighbors are all on the same page in regards to the need for this. And I think it's worthy to note that it could probably be funded with private money to get it done. But the timing, again, is the problem. So I am coming here tonight in the hopes of jump-starting this process if this council could see fit to provide direction sooner than later to Public Works to move forward to incorporate these controls on the parking lot consistent with the settlement agreement that the city has with the California Coastal Commission, which limits those hours, consistent with the posting on the parking lot, so it will in fact be closed during the nighttime hours. I think that would be a very wise step for you to take. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Don. Excellent use of alacrity and effectuate. That's impressive. Don is followed by Annie Ellis, and Annie will be followed by Lynn Norton, and then followed by Harriet Pollen.
Hello, y'all. Annie Ellis. I just wanted to come and say just a few words for someone that has been a very upstanding person in this community. My family's been here 60 years. I come today also speaking for several neighbors that their families have been here over 100 and something years. And my mom can't drive anymore, neither can they. And they were all very upset to hear the news of how this all went down when it was made so public that Jefferson Wagner purchased a condominium within the city limits so that he could serve again for our city. I think he's one of the most informed people on city council in the way that he works at his surf shop on weekends during the summer, where he sees all the biggest problems of all what's been mentioned here today about the traffic and all the different things that are coming up in this city and how different things are being handled. To see the waste of tax dollars, of city dollars and LA County dollars. The people that I've been talking to in my neighborhood that, like I say, cannot get here because they are elderly and have been here a long time, they'd really like an answer to how this went down when we've known that he purchased a place to live when he started serving our city again. And he's a very upstanding guy, and it was really, really sad to people that have been here a long time to see how this was done, in the way it was done. That's not the Malibu that I grew up in. It just isn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Lynn Norton. Lynn, are you here? And Lynn will be followed by Harriet. And I think that is it.
Good evening, council members. I also want to make a comment about what happened to Jefferson, and I have no conspiracy theories about what happened or why it happened, but the thing that I was most shocked about was that he had a gun or guns pointed at him, and even if whatever this is, I would really ask at the city council to ask for some answers. What level of warrant do you need to be able to point a gun at somebody? Because that's just scary and unacceptable. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Harriet, you're up. You're the last one.
Hi, my name is Harriet Pollen, and I know most of you on the council. I've sat on committees next to Dusty Peak and Jefferson and other people in the community. I moved to Malibu in '72, and I was a really serious volunteer from 1974 up until 1981. I feel that I can speak with some degree of authority because of what was accomplished during the time I was volunteering for the city. It's a shame that there is no history of what volunteers have done for the city of Malibu. We would not be the city we are now had not volunteers stepped up and conscientiously fought freeways, nuclear plants, all sorts of things that would have destroyed the Malibu that you see. In 1974, working on the Malibu Township Council, I was made the director of traffic. My job was to spend whatever time I could to get the trucks off the coast highway. Most people who live in Malibu now do not remember what the coast highway was like. We had large trucks up and down the highway constantly. We had daytime accidents where the trucks would force cars that had children coming from school off the highway. We had nothing, absolutely nothing, but a 2-lane road. In my 7 years working on getting the trucks off the highway, I drove the highway many times with Adriana Gianturco, who you may remember was the person who gave us diamond lanes. We mapped the highway. We mapped every bad intersection on that road. We did what we need to do. We got permission from the state, and we worked with Caltrans to put a center hold lane. Before that time, there was no center hold lane. If you were going to make a left and you stopped on the highway, you might as well kiss everything goodbye. All of the roads that intersected with the highway were highly, highly dangerous. And in 1981, after a huge hearing in downtown LA, in which people told me, be careful, the truckers will come after you, having done all of these studies, we managed to get the truck ban passed. In the years that followed, I worked with Jefferson on many different committees. I am here to tell you the city of Malibu needs a history of the people who work to keep the city as it is. And we wanted you to run the city so those of us who volunteered all of our spare time could rest assured that the city was in good hands. This treatment of Jefferson or anybody else is so appalling to those of us who gave our time to the city that it is really awful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes public comment. So now we're moving on to 2B, which is committees. We already got the one committee report. And Norm, I believe you have a wastewater advisory committee report.
Yes. Good evening, City Council members and Chair Mullen. As chairman of the Wastewater Advisory Committee, I'm here to recognize two members that have retired, Richard Sherman and Elaine Weissman. They worked very hard, provided a great deal of their personal time and their knowledge to benefit the committee, the committee and the city of Malibu. As chairperson, I provided a letter. Each of you will have a copy of it. If you don't now, it'll be handed out to you, which basically states the amount of work and effort that each one of them did. And I think it's important that we celebrate the service that they provided, and that's what I'm here for tonight. Having said that, Elaine Weissman is a registered architect, and I also celebrate the new member, which is Nick Barsacchini, and he will take over her responsibilities to advise the committee with regard to issues associated with architecture. Another member, which will be replacing Richard Sherman. Richard spent 17 years on the committee. Elaine spent 8 years on the committee. And Kevin Poffenberger is a registered civil engineer and will basically be taking Dick Sherman's place, if it were possible, which it is not. No one can replace Richard Sherman. He has done just about everything that a person could possibly do in terms of wastewater treatment in the city of Malibu. On-site wastewater treatment, advanced wastewater treatment systems, and he will be sorely missed. Having said that, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Norm. Let me make a little note here before I go on. Okay, we're on to City Council Subcommittee reports and Mayor and Council Member meeting attendance reports and inquiries. City Manager, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just a few things I wanted to provide an update on. We received the Heal the Bays beach report this past week, and I'm happy to report that 5 of 6 beaches in Malibu got an A or an A+. So we are doing much better than 6 years ago when 5 out of 6 beaches got F grades. So I'm very happy to see that improvement in our water quality. We've also gotten back the count from Los Angeles County on the homeless count that was conducted recently, and Malibu's count is down 14%. We're down to 155, and that's down from 180 homeless individuals who were counted a year ago. So we're really pleased with that outcome, and I wanted to thank the people concerned and our deputies who really worked pretty tirelessly to find permanent housing for our homeless community. We placed 29 people into permanent housing since September 2016. I wanted to give a little update. I'm sure many of you have noticed the paving that has gone on in the Civic Center area as part of the wastewater treatment facility. They'll be finishing up the paving and striping over the next week or so. And there are a few remaining areas that were not fully paved, but will be paved as part of the annual street overlay, including Malibu Road. And then lastly, I wanted to let the public know that we did get a preliminary answer back from FEMA on our appeal of the flood maps. It's not their formal response, it was just a preliminary response. They agree with some of the things that were appealed and disagree with some things, and so staff is working with our consultant Moffitt and Nickel to speak with FEMA. Hopefully we'll be getting their formal response soon so that we can prepare our response back and fight the issues that are raised. And we're planning on bringing an item to council on that. So that concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Do I have any questions for the city manager? Okay, let's go to council member comments. Skylar.
Good evening, everybody. I guess I'll start with Harriet. I don't know if she left. Good. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your commitment to the city and the work that you and many others have put in for so many years to recognize the fact that we didn't want a nuclear power plant here, and we didn't want big trucks on the highway, and to make this community safer and a better place and an awesome place to live. And we're very grateful for all of that time. And like you, I've always found Jefferson to be one of the most honest people that I've ever known. A firm believer in the fact that anybody is innocent until proven guilty, as John Mazza mentioned earlier. And I think that I speak for myself, and that I've always found Jefferson to be a very straight shooter. And I, like Laura, was utterly shocked when I heard that, and I don't have any knowledge of anything related to that prior to that. A lot of people alleged a lot of things tonight. There's very little to any truth of many of the comments from, I believe it was a woman, I think named Linda. And just wanted to also go on the record to kind of, I've heard different things and read different things in the newspapers that I've never received a call from anyone with the last name Viragosa specifically related to Riva's hiring contract working for the city or anything of the sort. And anything mentioned about that in any publication would be false and utterly false. I can't speak for the rest of the council members, but I would imagine the same thing. So I just want to clear the record on that and say that, again, I feel that Jefferson has always been an honest member of our community and is extremely committed to his service here, as is everybody else in serving our city. Last week, I also want to thank you, Norm, for bringing that up. I also had the, previous to being elected on the city council, served with Dick Sherman and with Elaine on wastewater advisory committee. and sad to see them go, and grateful for their service and dealing with probably some of the dirtier stuff in the community. But always liked the name for the Wacko Committee from what they got to deal with. But I find humor in that, and happy to see Nick serving on there, and thank you for your time with that. Last week I attended with Mayor Mullen the graduation at Malibu High School, and really enjoyed one gentleman whose name I'm forgetting right now, but he had a very fruitful speech about the public education system, but brought it all in the end and elaborated on how awesome Malibu High School was, and it was kind of funny to see everyone's faces shocked and then go to the student really got it and brought everyone's attention. So that was a pleasure to do that, and then following that I attended the next day the middle school promotion, and we're very fortunate to have an awesome school, although it's under construction right now, and making a lot of progress there. And earlier this evening, Rick and I had an A&F meeting, and we'll have that item coming back to the council in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Skylar. Norm? Or excuse me, Norm. You know, Norm, I got Norm on the brain. Lou.
Thank you. First of all, I want to echo what Skylar said. First of all, thank you all for coming down and showing your friendship to and support for Jay. And I consider myself one of his friends as well. And I don't know anything about what happened before, and I'm going to take the advice of his attorney and not comment on an ongoing investigation. I can tell you that I never got a call from Antonio Villaraigosa about anything, ever. And a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, Skylar, is beyond far-fetched, so I won't even go into that. I do agree with you also about Harriet. I think that the volunteers that made this city, we're all volunteers, basically. Everybody who's ever in this room generally is a volunteer. And I've been involved in my community for a very long time. I know so many other people have as well. And there should be some sort of a process for recognizing them. And we should probably try to figure out some way to do that, because there really have been an awful lot of people that made this town what it is. And as far as what I've been doing, last week I attended with Rick, Laura, and Riva the League of California Cities Policy Planning Committee meetings in Sacramento. And my committee is Housing, Community, and Economic Development. And one of the bills that we discussed was a reform of the regional housing needs assessment numbers, which are generated by the state. And if you remember, we had a huge issue, and if Lynn Norton is still here, she knows a lot about it, where we had to zone for 442 new housing units that were based on complete misinformation and mistakes. And there was no way to appeal it or correct it. And this new piece of legislation will allow that to happen. When mistakes like that happen, we will not have to invent 442 places for people to zone. It was just, it was an interesting situation here, and I know Lynn spent a ton of time on it, as did all of our staff, and now we won't have to be subject to that anymore. On Wednesday, I'm going back to Sacramento because our bill, AB 3162, is coming for the Senate Health Committee. I'm going to testify, and it's on its way to the floor of the Senate. And as I said before, it passed the Assembly 71-0. So, thank you. We're looking forward to the Senate victory as well. And I will be calling in for our next council meeting on June 25th because I will be at the National League of Cities Summer Planning Session. I'm the vice chair of the Federal Advocacy Committee that handles the issue of sober living homes, and I'll be there working on efforts, federal efforts, to address this problem. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And Laura, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everybody that came. I also, I agree with both what Skylar and Lou said. I have been quoted as saying some things that I never said. I was on the phone, got another phone call, picked it up, and it was the LA Times, and they asked me about it, and I had just had somebody tell me about what had happened with Jefferson. And the first thing that I could think of to say was I was shocked. And that's all I said. And the other quote that was people said that I've been saying was actually from our assistant city manager, Lisa Soger. I never said anything about it having to do with the city or not. That was not my quote. And if you read the LA Times article, you will see that that's the truth. I also have known Jefferson for a long time, and I spoke with him, and I'm sorry that he is going through this, and I think I do agree with what Lisa said. This has nothing to do with the city. I had no idea about it. I was shocked about it. So I think that we all, I think everybody was shocked, and I hope that everything turns out well. And I think I'm going to agree with Lou, and I know advice to not speak about it until we have more facts. But I will say that I too, like Skylar and Lou, have never gotten a phone call from anyone in Villaraigosa's campaign or in his family or from he himself. Never happened. So that's all I need to say about that. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. I wanted to thank our young poet, Nell, and our older poet, Ricardo. I think I'm so proud of our Cultural Arts Commission and the work that they've done on so many different levels, and I think our Poet Laureate program has really been a great success, and I'm very excited to see how it's grown and how it will continue to grow. So, and I wanted to thank Pepperdine University for collaborating with the city and the Arts Commission on that. And I do want to also thank Richard and Elaine for their service on the wastewater committee. Elaine has moved on to greener pastures and is a member of a different commission. And so we do have a policy in the city of Malibu that you can't be on two commissions. So she did need to resign. So thank you for that acknowledgement of them, Lou. Oh, Norm. So, and then Dawn, I also had spoken to my planning commissioner about the issue, and it's already on the planning commission agenda. So we'll wait and see what they recommend and get it back here. Harriet, I was nodding when you were speaking because you know, Lou already said it, this community is made up of so many hundreds of volunteers over the years, and I thank you for your service and the people sitting next to you, because really almost everybody in this room has really put in a lot of time and effort. And I remember a number of years ago, there was kind of an oral history being done for the early founders and a lot of the people that had volunteered, and I don't know what happened with that. And I don't know if it was the city doing it, the Parks and Rec, at that time the Parks and Rec department, or it was an independent group. But if anyone has that information, maybe they can get that to you or to me, and we can figure out maybe how to restart that. I think Pamela Conley-Ulick was involved in that, so she might be somebody good to ask. But thank you for reminding us of so many volunteers and really how this city was born. As Lou said, I was up in Sacramento last week, and I'm on the Environmental Quality Subcommittee, or Policy Committee. I'm the chair, and we talked about a lot of things this time that were relevant to Malibu, one of them about wildfires and who's responsible, who's going to pay if it's found that the energy providers, the electrical companies, are responsible for that, whether it would be, especially the investor-owned ones, whether it would be the investors or it would go down to the ratepayers. And there's some bills about that. We supported not having, recommending to the board that the ratepayers would not be paying for this, but that it would stay with the investors. And we also discussed the whole issue of the wildfires and how that's going to be dealt with, about who is going to be responsible in the years to come. So more on that. And then I was I went to the business roundtable last week, I guess, with many members of the audience was there too, our monthly business roundtable, sponsored by the Malibu Times. And then I also had the honor of being on Senator Ben Allen, who used to be on our school board. He had a float at the West Hollywood and the LA Pride Parade yesterday. And that was a real trip. And our own Senator Henry Stern was there also, as well as Assemblymember Richard Bloom. And there were many dignitaries and a lot of elected officials there. But if you've never done that, it's something you've got to go do at least once in your life. And the thing that I really loved about the day was that it was all about being positive, and it was all about inclusion and pride and love and acceptance. And I think the more we have of that in the world, the better our world is. So I just wanted to, we have an upcoming COG meeting, Council of Governments next week, and then also on the 16th this weekend is an e-waste, electronic waste here at City Hall that we do, and I think that that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Jefferson?
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, council members, for your support and good words. I just hope that in the community that we can reach out and take our time and review facts and base most of our decisions and our comments upon the facts that are given to us by the LA County District Attorney's Office. It's probably the prudent way to go. I'm glad that the attorney that I hired with the GoFundMe money has left the room, because I don't have to pay him from this point on for the rest of the evening. Moving on to business. Thank you for all your support and your warm words. Last comment on that, let's try and focus on facts, and remember that although this council doesn't work together perfectly all the time, there's not a member of this council that does not have their heart into this city in whatever faction or whichever direction they take most of their interest. I respect all the work that Lou and Laura and Rick and Skylar have done, and I would hope that you would respect their work in their actual areas that they concentrate most of their time on. So, thank you. Harriet, the oral history, if you're still here, they had Judge John Merrick was one of the interviewees, as well as Skylar's father. And I don't know if they got around to Walt, but that has, oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay, well.
Solve the problem.
Okay, I know there's intellectual property out there that we can continue with this. Maybe if the council sees fit. Maybe if the council sees fit in the near future, we could put that forward to one of the art commissions or the poetry type thing and move that forward. I think it's valuable and I think it's necessary. As far as my activities for the city, next week we have the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission meeting on Thursday. I'll be there, and I'll be representing the MSA in their wishes to get Third Point back, as well as the Surfrider Foundation. That is not going away. We're going to stick on it. We've got warm reception from state parks, but a better reception from LA County, because they have plenty of sand to give away from the dredging in front of the Marina Del Rey opening. Norm, thanks for the comments on Richard Sherman. Those big green trucks are great targets. That's Topanga Unlimited, for those of you that remember them. Topanga Underground, that was it. Yeah, good memory. Thanks, Lou, for AB 3162. I get all the emails, and I just thank you for your work. I think the community owes you a great hand for all those efforts and the oversaturation of these rehab houses that ruin neighborhoods. And Lou has gone to the far ranks of effectiveness in bringing that forward. Thanks. And just wanted to remind everybody that next weekend is the $2,000 that the city wisely spent with Henry Stern to have a surf event for kids. It'll be up at Zoom at 14 or 15.
16.
16, yeah. It's one of the, if you get anywhere between Trancas and 10, you'll be fine to visit the event. And then we have Zeracis in 2 weeks, and on the 26th, and that's where you get to come and make comments about things that we're trying to formulate here at the city for benefit of the future and code enforcement, things like that. Thank you.
It is Tower 16 at 9 o'clock on Saturday.
Skylar has another comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Lester, I don't see you, but I just wanted to ask this council if, I would like to not see anything else proceed with the crosswalk that's near the hotel, and I don't know if we can direct a letter to Caltrans or something like that until we get them to come here and explain to us what's going on, because I still have, and the community has a lot of unanswered questions as to how this was done. So I don't know the way to do that or if that can be done, but I'm asking kind of our city attorney that.
You know, it's not on your agenda tonight, and so you can't take any action, but you can, you know, put it back
for
in.
a future.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I would like to do then.
Thought we did that last time, basically. Is that why? What the
It's coming back, but they weren't able to come tonight, and they're coming at the next meeting, correct? Okay. Sorry, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Harriet, thank you very much for coming down here. You're right on the money, and I am very grateful to the people who've gone before and done the great things that you enumerated. And I try to mention those whenever possible. You know, like in my State of the City speech, it's important to recognize the people who did the heavy lifting before it was cool and before it became a city, and to enable the place to become a city. I think that's very important for us to know our recent history and our medium length history and our deep history that goes way, way back. So I appreciate you coming down here and making those comments. And you're right. You're right. And I think we might have the answer over there in somebody who has attempted to capture some of that oral history. So I'd like to make a suggestion to the city manager that maybe we can consider this as something that the community services could do. And it doesn't need to be anything quick, but some effort to capture, before it's all gone, some of the oral history of the great volunteers that you mentioned. And I think one conversation will lead to another, will lead to another, that will lead to another. And I think you're right. We need to capture those stories before they're lost, like tears in the rain, so to speak. And it's very important that we commemorate the hard work that's done by everybody who's come before. So thanks very much for coming down. Can we do that, something like that?
Absolutely. That was started a few years ago by our media information officer, and I will have our media team pick it up as a project, and we'll continue it.
Thank you very much. Poet laureate coming down here with our newest poet giving a poem. That's really a wonderful thing that happens here in the city. And like a lot of these things that have been initiated recently, he's taken the ball and he's run with it, and it's gaining momentum. And I think that it's great whenever I see him come down here. I think Ricardo has really put his energy into it, and it's made the program really good. So I appreciate that. Norm, it's very nice of you to recognize people on your wastewater team. That's what a great leader does, is recognize the people who put in the hard work. And I appreciate you coming down here and giving us this letter, okay, to let us know that the hard work of these people that have done for many years. I mean, there's a lot of benefit from the individual effort that's gone on by these two, and I appreciate the fact that you came down here and recognized your team members. That's very good of you. I'm on the Public Safety Advisory Committee, I guess it is, of the California League of Cities, and like Lou and Laura, I went up to Sacramento, and we met and we voted on things, and it was good. We're all on the same sheet of music there. It's all like firemen and policemen, and there's no sort of dissenting votes. Everyone's pointed in one direction, so it's kind of an interesting group to be with. It's not real controversial. It's pretty easy for me to be there. We had an ANF meeting this afternoon. We also had an ad hoc committee for the SMM-USD, Laura and I, and Riva, to talk about how that's going, the negotiations for, we provide oversight, the negotiations for the separation of the school district. Let me see. I also went to the Malibu High School graduation, which was awesome. It was really good. I was lucky because I was on the other end of the county in Laverne, and I had to race back and got there just in time for the thing. But I really noticed from the graduating high school class a lot of energy and a lot of appreciation for their great experience, and a lot of school spirit and esprit de corps and some creative stuff that came there. It was cool. I mean, I was like, hey, I wanted to be a part of this team. It was wonderful, and they could see that they had great feelings about their teachers, etc. Lou, once again, thanks for your victory in the sausage factory and your mentoring of me and my tasks ahead. I appreciate that. Okay, let me talk about Jefferson and all the people who came down here to speak in his behalf, and I'm sorry that a lot of them left before we got to hear our comments. A lot of them sort of made accusatory things of us and then didn't give us the benefit of hearing our side of the story. So that's okay. That's what you get when you take on this position, and it's thank God I've got a day job, I guess. So I'm immune to it now. I don't really mind. My wife says, "How can you do that? People yelling and screaming at you and saying bad things about you." It's like, bah, it comes with the job. So I'm a trained journalist. I used to be a journalist. I have a journalism degree, and I know the effective casualty radius of journalists. So when I get a phone call asking me for a statement about this, when I read it about in the paper, I don't go there, and I know enough to stay away from those wonderful professionals who don't always represent what you say in the best manner. So I called Jefferson, and I called him on his cell phone. I didn't hear back for a couple days, and I found out that was the one thing they confiscated with him. So I called him at home, and we had a brief conversation, and we talked about the whole thing. And I would say, as far as I'm concerned, there's no change in Jefferson's status. He's still a card-carrying member of the team. He's a man of integrity. He's been a long-time member of the community. He's held in high esteem by everybody, as far as I can tell. There's no change in status for him, and as far as I'm concerned, it's business as usual for Jefferson here, and I'm going to follow his lawyer's counsel and basically keep my mouth shut about the whole thing. And as far as I'm concerned, you're still part of the team. Nothing's changed. So it's nice that everyone came down here to speak on his behalf, but I don't have any doubt that everything's going to work out just fine. I have no idea who sicked the DA on him. I'd love to know that, but I don't know. I have no idea. And as far as the Villaraigosa accusations, I did talk to Antonio Villaraigosa, but he was campaigning for the governorship when he called me up, and I did actually meet him on a plane once as I was getting on because he happened to be there. I was like, hey, how you doing? But he didn't mention anything about Riva's contract, and certainly didn't strong-arm me into giving her more money or anything like that. So I really don't know where these stories come from, but I would say that it's an example of journalists doing their thing, which is selling newspapers. So, and that's all I have to say about that. So that's it for comment. And then we're on to the consent calendar. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent calendar?
I'd like to pull 3B5.
Anything else? Okay, so we'll pull 3B5.
I'll make a motion for the balance of the consent calendar.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jesse, you don't have to come up. It's okay. I just have a comment. Either of you. I just, the 3B5 is the J. Karagian Citizenship Award nomination. And the reason I pulled it is that I wanted to just say, so the Parks and Rec Commission nominated Justine Petretti and Mike Mulligan as the recipients, and I wanted to say two things. I wanted to completely and 100% agree with their recommendation and just let them and the community know, talk about volunteers, Harriet, that they have given so much of their time and effort and energy to our community over the years. And the other thing that I did want to point out is that we've been giving this since 2002, and we have not given them out every year. But I did want to say that I was really heartened to see that Justine was on this, a woman was on it, because in all those years we have given this award to 17 men and 3 women. And so I think that, and I'm not faulting anybody. I've made recommendations. I mean, I've voted on this for a number of years, and sometimes I just think that we don't see certain volunteers as much as we see others. Maybe they're more involved in sports that win or something like that. And so I just want to make sure, as this will be the last year I'll be voting on this, that we keep this, that we want to make sure that maybe we balance this a little bit and make sure that we see the many women that have given so much of their time and hours and blood, sweat, and tears to this. So with that, I would like to recommend the the nomination or the approval of Justine and Mike for this award.
I'd like to second it, but I have a comment also.
Go ahead.
I think these two recipients, Mike Mulligan and especially for me, Justine Bertretti. She was my appointment to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and she worked like crazy for 8 years for this city and the children in it, and I just want to thank her again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It passes. We are on to 4 Alpha.
Good evening, council members. Lily Rudolph is going to make the presentation tonight on this appeal item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. The item before you is an appeal of a Planning Commission denial of a 1-year extension of a CDP for the demolition of a gas station canopy and the construction of a new commercial building. The site is located at 22729 PCH in the eastern area of Malibu on the inland side of PCH. A car wash currently occupies the site. As background, the Planning Commission originally approved the CDP on June 1st, 2010. 4 time extensions were approved subsequent to the original approval. And on April 24th, 2017, a 5th extension request was submitted prior to the expiration date of the CDP. On December 18th, 2017, the Planning Commission denied the 5th extension request. So this presentation will focus on the main issues that the appellant raised in his appeal and his subsequent correspondence, which are identified as appeal item 1B, 3D, and 3B in the agenda report. The issues have also been reorganized to focus on the more complex issues first, starting with item 1B, which has been copied from the appellant's appeal submittal and shown on the screen. The appellant identifies the lack of available construction loans, the death of the project architect, and his due diligence to move the project forward as reasons to support his time extension request. The appellant raises LCP policy number 5 in his appeal. The policy was adopted to clarify vague terms in the LCP pertaining to expiration and extension of coastal development permits. The policy was recommended in lieu of processing an LCP amendment. The policy clarifies that due cause generally means that the applicant has experienced extraordinary circumstances that has prevented the applicant from commencing the development despite diligent efforts. The policy also states that the aggregate extensions should not extend the life of the permit beyond 5 years. The appellant did face multiple extraordinary circumstances that resulted in the delay of his project. However, staff's recommendation and the Planning Commission's decision to deny the time extension is based on the combination of the cumulative number of years since the CDP approval and the appellant's intent not to pursue the construction of the office beyond what was needed to prevent the CDP from expiring. Building Safety approved the project for plan check in November 11, 2017. The applicant did not submit plans for plan check to the other city departments, which is required as part of the plan check process. So while the applicant did initiate the plan check process, no permits have been issued yet. The second item is appeal item 3D. The appellant states that he has demonstrated extraordinary circumstances that would necessitate extending the CDP to exceed the aggregate life of 5 years. The primary purpose in allowing extensions is to ensure an applicant has a reasonable opportunity to commence the project for which he has received entitlements. The applicant has had reasonable opportunity to commence the project, specifically nearly 5 years since the project architect passed away. The appellant raises the timing of the Planning Commission hearing as a factor that influenced the decision to deny his time extension request. The applicant submitted a time extension request in April 2017. The Planning Commission hearing was in December 2017. The scheduling of the hearing was to allow the applicant time to obtain plan check approvals, but was also complicated by the multiple concurrent applications for the site. Because in addition to the subject approved CDP application for the office building, the appellant is also concurrently processing 2 CUP amendments for the property for increased number of parking spaces for the existing car wash, a vintage car museum with retail sales, and a 36-room boutique hotel and associated zone changes. So it should be noted that at the same time, staff was working on an LCPA to address CDP expirations and extensions since June 2016, when the LCPA was initiated. This eventually resulted in the adoption of LCP policy number 5 in November 2017. The adoption of the policy did not play a role in the timing of the Planning Commission hearing for the project. Item 3B is the appellant's statement that the Planning Commission decision was contrary to all precedent and all other past and concurrent Planning Commission decisions on LCP extensions. The applicant was treated differently than all the other applicants for extensions. The Planning Commission denied the time extension request because the applicant did not demonstrate evidence of due cause, and because there are unique circumstances to this request, such as the multiple pending applications and the intent to commence the office project by demolishing the canopies while pursuing a zone change in an application for the hotel. These circumstances create an uncertain future for the site depending on the outcome of the hotel project, which could take multiple years to process. Subsequent to the publication of the agenda report, 3 pieces of correspondence were submitted for the project. A letter from the appellant and applicant Norm Haney, and 2 letters from Pat Healy. All 3 letters were distributed to the City Council in advance of tonight's meeting. So the appellant raises several other issues in his appeal, such as whether a change in use constitutes development, a lack of a fair and impartial public hearing, the Coastal Commission's pending review of LCP policy number 5, and the statement that the project is vested and approved. We believe that we discussed those items sufficiently in the agenda report and that these items do not need to be repeated in tonight's presentation. However, we're available to respond to any questions you may have regarding those issues and any of the items discussed previously. So with that, staff is recommending that the City Council approve the resolution denying the appellant's appeal, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have, let's see, 3 speakers. I have Norm. So how much time does Norm get? 15 minutes? Okay. And then I have 2 other speakers. Norm goes first? Okay. Norm, you have the floor. 15 minutes. Of course, you can save as much time as you want for rebuttal. Of the 15 minutes, remaining 15 minutes.
Okay. First of all, I have a PowerPoint, and I'd like to reserve a minute for 2 people that are part of my group, which is Bob Woodward from M6 Consulting and Nick Barsicchini. If they haven't filled out slips, they will. And 4 minutes for rebuttal. And my presentation hopefully will take 8 minutes. So let's see, can we, there's a PowerPoint, very good. I beg your pardon? Right. Okay, well, I'm going to start out with basically what the primary issue is. And the primary issue is due cause. That's what it is. That's what makes the determination whether or not a project deserves an extension. Not whether or not you filed another application for another project. I mean, I have, but there's no conflict at all. And I think staff would have you believe that one of the provisions in the LCP is that you should not file two different projects at the same time, make two applications for two different projects on the same parcel. That's not what I've done. And that would be wrong. That would be very complicated. I mean, you're looking at geology, you're looking at height, you're looking at all these things, and you're trying to vet two projects at the same time. That's not what's going on here. The project that was approved for the Vintage Sports Car Museum, office building, whatever you want to call it, is 2,742 square feet. That was fully vetted. That's done. That's off to the side. That has to do with me trying to pull building permits on it and has nothing to do with the marijuana dispensary, which staff had no trouble accepting and recommending denial on, or the car wash, which is a 30-day, month-to-month lease. And they should have no question, no problems with the hotel, which is a goal that I really want to do. So why am I asking for an extension? Number one, under the development standards, under the city's provisions for extension, time extension, I qualify. I have a right to it. Number two, it's necessary for finance. And number three, what happens if the hotel does not get approved? What happens if I get hit by a Mack truck tomorrow and die? Then the project has really, the property has no real value because it doesn't have a project approved on it. So let me run through the PowerPoint here. All righty. All right, basically this is the local coastal program's extension provision. And it says that the approving authority may grant a reasonable extension of time for due cause. That's the issue. First of all, when I made the application for this extension, the standard for approving the extension was what was in place. And it was in place for almost 6.5 months before this new policy number 5 was approved by the City Council. And what was that standard that was in place at the time? Basically, due cause was if there was no change in the development standards, then the project will be approved again. So why put the staff and the applicant through that process all over again? Why have geology review it again? And let's talk about that. Geology is good for about 1 million years. They don't have to review it and collect fees. And the height standard's the same. The size of the building's the same. Nothing's changed. So why put everybody through the cost and the time it takes to review it again? That was the standard that was in place at the time I filed for the extension. And that was in place 6.5 months after I filed. But the new policy, which I believe I qualify for as well, which is I have never had a situation where a project architect has gotten ill and passed away in the middle of the process of getting a permit. Mike Barsicchini was a great architect. and he was a good friend for 34 years. And when he got ill, I didn't go to him and say, oh my God, you have to transfer all the copyrights over to me so I can find another architect. No, I stuck with him. I thought he'd recover. When he didn't recover, it was a shock. And I started looking for another architect. I was unable to find one, and primarily because no one wants to take over another architect's design, especially when the architect can't release the plans and permits and the approvals. So I went with Nick Barsicchini, Mike's son. He's a great architect designer when it comes to rural, residential. He doesn't have a lot of experience in commercial. But we went for it, and we filed the application, and we worked on it diligently until California Code Check actually approved the plans, signed them, and stamped them for construction. I think it's a bit disingenuous on the part of staff to say, but you didn't pull permits. Well, of course I couldn't pull permits until the time extension was granted. I did get permits for grading and drainage, but I couldn't start construction because they won't allow you to start construction on grading and drainage until the permit for the actual building has been approved. So what does it mean, due diligence? We've already talked about special circumstances, extraordinary circumstances outside of the control of the applicant. Clearly, that has occurred, and it did slow me down. I don't know whether it was 2 years or 3 years, but it slowed me down. So what do? You go to your structural engineer, you go to your architect, you go to your mechanical engineer, you go to your plumber, you go to your, you basically go to all of the professionals, and they look at the plans and they produce the working drawings. And you put them all together and you submit them to the city. The city then submits them to California Code Check. California Code Check, being unfamiliar or that unfamiliar with commercial, will take anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks. Then they come back to the city, and then you go pick them up, and then you take them to the electrical engineer, to the structural engineer, to the wastewater treatment engineer, and the list goes on. And you go back and forth like this, trying to get it approved. How much time do I have? Any?
Well, you just used 8.
I just used 8. Give me 1 more minute, and I'll try and finish this up.
Got it.
These are 46 pounds, 150 sheets of plans, every one approved for construction by California Code Check. That is more due diligence than anybody has submitted to this city council in all the years that it's existed. To say that I haven't done it, I spent over $150,000 when I found out that we needed help. Actually, California Code Check needed help when it came to commercial. I hired M6, which is a consulting company that does plan checking for other cities. And they were willing to come aboard and help California Code Check with the commercial process. And they were expensive, but well worth it. The approval of this will take just about 60 days to go through the process of being reviewed by the different departments to verify, it's a cursory review, that it's consistent with the project that was approved by the Planning Commission originally. Then the permit can be issued and I can start construction. You'll have questions with regard maybe with the hotel, and I can answer those. Bob, would you come up here and make a comment or two about the efforts that I put into?
Bob's filled out his own sheet, so don't make him cut into your time.
No, he's part of that.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he's part of it.
Okay. Working for you, Norm. Reined in by the city attorney.
Good evening, Mayor Mullen, members of council. Bob Woodward with M6 Consulting. And to speak on Norm's behalf and his project's behalf, we were brought on board about the middle of 2016. And Norm Haney that we met in the middle of 2016 was a highly motivated individual. He was really anxious to get his plans approved. He tasked us with working with California Code Check. He was faced with really a pretty long, almost diabolical list of corrections, which is not uncommon these days when you look at the range of codes that projects have to comply with, particularly commercial projects. It was not unusual, but his architect designer was having some difficulties with it. So we worked with California Code Check as well as with the MEP team, the structural engineer, the architect, the civil engineer, and worked through the issues and really brought this to a project that California Code Check could stamp off on and approve. So I can attest to Mr. Haney's diligence and interest in moving this project forward, and he's done a great job as far as we can tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
How much time is left?
4 minutes, 13 seconds.
Oh, thank you very much, and the rest of it I'll handle under rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Norm. We have another speaker, Pat Healy. That's what.
Good evening. Please uphold the staff recommendation. This project received CDP approval in 2010, 8 years ago, subject to certain conditions being met. The policy says that a CDP approval has a 5-year life unless there are exceptional circumstances or due cause, both of which do not exist with this project. The applicant states that the architect's illness and sudden death was an extraordinary circumstances because the architect controlled the rights to the plans. But due cause does not exist because appellant could have acquired the rights by just paying for the plans. Rather than paying, the applicant created a delay of his own making by choosing to work with the architect's son, who, according to the appellant, had no experience in commercial architecture. It was not until after the last CDP extension in 2016, after 5 years of delay, that applicant got serious about meeting the conditions of his permit. By hiring M3 to help facilitate the process. The appellant falsely states in the appeal that the project was vested, but if it was vested, he didn't have to extend this permit. The appellant then contradicts himself when he says that the only thing that remains for him to do is complete the required conditions is a year extension and a licensed architect signing the plans. But appellant has yet to submit plans to Geology, Environmental Health, and Public Works for plan check and approval. Further, if the project eventually is vested through demolition, the appellant admitted he would not diligently proceed to construct this project as required, potentially leaving a scarred landscape. The appellant states he is being treated differently from others who have sought extensions, but others have not applied for a zone change, which would disallow the project, and they do not have numerous applications for different projects at the same location. The appellant states that the policy limiting extension has yet to receive Coastal Commission approval, but this is not needed for the policy to be in effect. Appellant claims that the Planning Commission's failure to extend the CDP was contrary to law, but it is not. I'd like to add that there are changed circumstances which justify a reason to deny this extension. The changed circumstances since the CDP extension in 2016, the applicant has put in an application for a zone change which would disallow the project at this location.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, I'll stop there. You have my written comments. Thank you.
Okay, Norm, you're welcome to make a rebuttal at this point if you would like.
Yes, I'd can we have the PowerPoint brought up, please? I want to draw your attention to the timeline, the time sequence I handed out. The time that the extension was filed was April 24th, 2017. The CDP expiration date was June of 2017. California code check was filed or was signed and approved and stamped on November 1st, 2017. The new LCP policy, number 5, was adopted on November 13th, 2017, basically 12 days after the California code check stamped and approved all the plans for construction. And the Planning Commission denied, and it wasn't unanimous. There were 2 members that voted strongly to support the extension. The first motion to deny did not get a second. The second motion to approve the extension was approved by 2 of the commissioners, but didn't get the support by the other 3. Finally, Commissioner Mazza, whom I have a great deal of respect for, made a motion to deny a second time, and this time it got 3 votes and it passed. So I just find it somewhat curious that a month after the CDP policy number 5 was approved, I was scheduled for hearing. But for almost 8 months, I was not. I believe that I have proven due diligence. I believe that when your architect passes away in the middle of the process, that alone is a 2-year delay. I have done more than anyone else. How many projects have not received a CDP extension in the city of Malibu when requested? 0. This is the first one. And I don't know if staff is trying to make a point with this or not. I have a lot of respect for the staff, but I think they made a mistake in this case. I think I had a right to rely upon the development standards or the extension standards that were in effect at the time. And notwithstanding that, I also think that I meet the requirements under policy number 5 as well. I spent a lot of time, hired a lot of people, went to a lot of effort, and I'm on the verge of pulling the permit. If you want to talk about the hotel, I'd be happy to do that, but somebody's going to have to ask me about it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, Norm, thank you. Now I'm going to open it up for discussion. I see you going for the button, Lou. Go for it.
This seems pretty simple to me. Basically, this project was approved already by the Planning Department and the Planning Commission, and what we're talking about is an extension. And this extension was filed on April 24, 2017, and our new policy was adopted in November. One of the things we discussed when we discussed having a new policy at all was that it wasn't supposed to affect the things that were already in the pipeline. This project had been in the pipeline for 6 or 8 months, and that's what we said, that we weren't going to affect projects in the past. This affects a project in the past. And so I think that we should uphold this appeal, and anything that will knock down that eyesore on the PCH, as far as I'm concerned, we should approve.
Thank you, Lou. Anybody else? Laura, go for it.
Thank you to everybody who spoke. So I have a question about what Lou just said. So it's not just our own ordinances, but there's an LCP or an LIP or whatever, I always get them confused, policy that says you can only have a certain amount of years. And so that has not changed. Yes.
The LCP language that is in the LIP
Thank you.
related to extensions says that and I'm going off the top of my head, says the approving authority can grant a reasonable extension of time for due cause, but it doesn't define reasonable extension, and that's one of the elements that we included in our policy, but there's nothing that says what, that there's any particular limit in the code today.
Thank you.
Skylar?
Norm, I have a question for you. So you are, at the same time as you're trying to get this extension filed, I have heard, and it's also written in here, that you have entertained the idea of looking at a boutique hotel on this site. If you were to go and do that, you would not be building what's on here if you were to receive the zoning change for that type of use on this property. Is that correct?
I would do part of it. I would eliminate the canopies. I would do the grading and the drainage for most of it, approximately 75% of the project. And if I was fortunate enough to get the hotel approved, I would not continue with it. But if the hotel is not approved, I would be very happy to build the building that's been approved.
Okay, so I see, and this is the issue that I see within that is a time issue, right? And the fact that I have no idea what anybody would decide about that because that's not what's in front of us right now about the hotel. So my next question to you is, if you were granted an extension on this project, when would you start construction?
Within 60 days after I believe I can start construction 60 days from tonight.
Bonnie, would that be accurate in terms of what the remaining approvals are that he needs in order to do that?
I'm not sure if we have confirmation from building safety about that. I believe submittals still have to be made to the other reviewing departments, but that I would be inclined to take Norm's word for that.
I have another question for you, Bonnie. When the hearing took place on this, and I know that it wasn't a split decision, but it was a 3-2 vote. The issues that were raised by Councilmember Jennings and Planning Commissioner Jennings and Commissioner Pearson in support of the project, did they put much weight on the extension request related to the death of the architect and the time associated with that, or was most of that strictly in relation to the financing element for that time? For me, due cause would be that if an architect passes away in the middle of a project, I think that, and I look at the rest of the council when I'm saying this, that we would have to know that that would be due cause for a project taking longer in terms of that time. Now, we've sort of set this 5-year timetable, and we know that this was originally approved in 2010, so we're well beyond that. But I also understand that there's sort of some gaps in that where nothing happens, because if Mr. Haney's waiting for a time extension or something to be approved, he's not going and spending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on moving forward with the project until he knows that that's granted. So I sort of recognize that there's a little bit of overlap within that. I want to be, very fair and straight with this and how we move forward. And I think I'm curious to hear from the rest of the commissioners. But if Mr. Haney was to come here and say that we know that we can start construction in this time and we're comfortable with that, we would probably be wise to pad that a little bit. But I would have to hear from the rest of the commissioners about that. Confused. Commissioners, council members. No, and I'd be curious to hear what the Mayor Pro Tem and Mayor had to say about that.
Thank you. Just wanted to state that I have visited the site 5 times a week as I walk between McDonald's and my retail store.
And I also did visit the site last week, sorry.
I was mostly concerned and looked at what the ultimate project was, which Norm had mentioned was his hotel, wishes for the hotel. And I briefly looked at that pile of 46 pounds of material there, and that was about the extent of my investigation. I kind of depended on planning staff and the planning commissioners to kind of give us a bearing of where to head on this. And so, just revealing what I know, I'm not into the depth of the issues here, as many of the other council members are. And I lack in that performance. I just haven't gotten into the depth of it. But it seems like the hotel ultimately is a fair use of the property. But once again, it's an issue for us as council members to move it on or deny it. And I understand Norm's got a ton of money into this, and fair enough. I understand that as well. So I'll have to wait and look into the intricacies of the timing on this. I mean, I have the yellow sheet here. Fair enough, I get that and I understand it. But ultimately, I think the final project is something that many people could accept. But right now, I'm kind of open-minded on it. I just kind of shrug my shoulders. I'll have to wait and kind of feel it out. Thank you.
Great, a lot of shrugging of shoulders here. Laura, you want to say something? Go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. One other question, or can we, and I know I had spoken to you about this, and I didn't visit this site for this, but I have visited the site for kind of a tour and explanation of the hotel, but that was months ago. But I am aware of the site and the beautiful canopies and car wash, though I've never brought my car there. Could we, in a way, split the difference and say if you are able to start this within, because I think part of the concern is this is going to keep going on and on and on and on. And I did speak to my planning commissioner about this, to Mikey, about his reasonings behind his, and he did feel that there are there have been other projects with projects like La Paz had a 15% and a 20%, and I know that that's not something we want to do, or I would want to do either, but I'm just trying to understand if we would be allowed to kind of split the difference and say, well, we could give you an extra, 90 days, and if you're not able to start construction by then this will expire, or that's not something that we're even could be looking at. And I see Skylar wanting to comment on that, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'm just trying to put something out there.
Yeah, it's absolutely within the council's discretion to choose what the period is of if you decided to grant an extension. At this point, given the amount of time that has elapsed since the expiration date of June 1st, 2017, we would need to extend it if that's what you wanted to do for at least a year, and then whatever additional months if that's a scenario of.
You mean saying that a year has already gone by?
Right.
Okay. Skylar, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I have a question for Norm. So I want to kind of understand this because I sort of feel that, in hearing Jefferson's comments, that in your perfect world per se, this project would be a boutique hotel. And for us to go and approve what's not a boutique hotel on it and to continue that, I don't know if that's the wisest move, other than if if the reason for that is to say, I will start with my drainage, I will start with the grading and those elements of the project, I will remove that stuff, knowing that if you go and move forward with a boutique hotel, you're going to have to do that anyway, and that's part of that project. Is that sort of what the thinking is on that from your point?
That's exactly right. But let me add one last thing. With regard to the hotel, the geology department's approved it. The health department's approved it. The public works department's approved it.
You're talking about they've approved the idea of putting a hotel there.
That's exactly right. The applications have been reviewed and approved. And in my perfect world, I have it back in front of the Planning Commission within the next 6 months.
Okay, but then I'm bringing that back to reality is that we don't even have that boutique hotel can't even go in that type of zoning. Is that correct? From what's existing right there right now.
Right, there's a zone change application in the door as well.
And the timeline for a zone change application is what? Could be multiple years. Could be 6 months. Could be.
My optimistic guess would be a year.
So
to get through the city process and then also get through the Coastal Commission's certification.
Process. And I would just in knowing this city and my short 34-year existence here, I would be hard pressed to say that would happen in a year.
I have talked to Jack Ainsworth, the executive director of the California Coastal Commission. He is extremely excited about putting the zone change on the agenda just as soon as it goes to him. I'm working very hard on this, but part of the request is people will not make a loan on a piece of property that doesn't have approval on it. And that's a serious issue because I'm putting in anywhere between $500,000 and $700,000 trying to get this other project approved. If for any reason it's not approved, I could have somewhere to go. And I'd like to see it in front of you folks, as I said, within the next 6 months. And I've gotten through every department in the city. And it's just a matter of finishing the questions that were raised by the staff and having it put on your agenda. Not your agenda, but the Planning Commission's agenda.
In terms of the planning review on the hotel project, there are a lot of questions we have outstanding, and I'm not certain that Public Works has completely resolved traffic issues. They've looked at a preliminary analysis, but in some subsequent discussions with them today, it sounds like they weren't aware that there was a restaurant included as part of the hotel proposal. So I'm not saying that they haven't signed off on it. I'm just not sure that they were completely aware of the full scope of what's included.
Well, let me comment on that just for 1 second. I asked Bob Brager who he would recommend for the traffic engineer, and he made a suggestion. I went to that gentleman and I provided all the information to him. He analyzed the project and he analyzed the boutique hotel that was also proposed. He came back saying that the boutique hotel would reduce the amount of traffic on PCH by 40%. Not all the traffic, but in comparison to the salon, to the spa, to the doctor's offices, that all of those uses currently there are generating more traffic. This will be the only commercial project ever approved by the city that will reduce traffic and hopefully put $1 million in your coffers on a yearly basis. So yes,
I just caution you not to get too far into debating the veracity of traffic reports for applications that haven't yet even been made.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little far off the reservation here on terms of other projects that are not before us tonight. I think, as I understand this.
I would only ask you to focus on due cause.
What we have is, and I'm gonna have a few questions for you. A project that was approved, okay, not a builder, but once you get to the approval phase and they issue a development permit, as I understand it, you have plans, right? Right? And you can take your permit and those plans and you can go build something, right?
You get your planning entitlement, and then you develop your construction drawings and through the plan check process. So there's two permits. There's the planning permit, and then there's the construction permit.
Okay, so that's where he got the permit to do that, and then he has his architect working on it, and his architect has problems along the way, and that's the due cause issue, right? Okay. So this original permit was approved in 2010, and we're now at 2018. Is that unusual? Or have there been a lot of projects that have permits that keep getting extended? I'm talking historically. I know we've got a new policy, but I mean historically that get extended like for 10 years.
There have been projects that have had 5, 6, 7 extensions, 8 extensions. I couldn't tell you what the maximum is.
Okay.
But it has happened.
When I think I heard something, and I want to find out if this is true, that's in your presentation you said that the new policy 5 did not play a role in the Planning Commission's decision. Did you say that?
I said that the scheduling of the Planning Commission hearing in December was not due to the City Council's adoption of LCP policy number 5 in November.
That was one of the contentions you had about getting delayed. Okay, I got that. Thank you. And the original project, when it went before the Planning Commission, and I'm talking about this extension that went before the Planning Commission in, not the original project, but this request for an extension that went before the Planning Commission in November, I guess it was. Did the planning staff recommend approving the extension or not approving the extension?
We recommended denying the extension at that time.
Okay, thanks. He made, Norm made a statement that the city has never denied a request for a CDP extension. Is that true?
We did a little research on that question. This is a different question, but staff has recommended denial in 3 cases. La Paz is one where the commission agreed. I forget if that went to the council as well. And then this one is the second one where the commission has denied an extension.
In the history of Malibu?
Yes. As Norm stated, historically, extensions have been looked at in a pretty lenient manner. And they're, back in 2016 when we came to you to initiate the CDP extension, LCP amendment, and that sort of thing, there had been increasing concern about the numbers of extensions that were being granted and the shelf life that projects were beginning to have and how drawn out those were. And so we had begun to, on a staff level, evaluate these with more scrutiny. And so that, I would say, began kind of in 2016 through 2017 when we brought the policy to Zoraces, or at that time it was an amendment. And so it has, I would say, the way the commission and the way staff has looked at these has evolved over the last, I'd say, 2 years, 18 months or so. But as I was saying in response to Councilmember Rosenthal's question, the LCP doesn't have a lot of details written. It just says due cause and a reasonable extension of time. So it leaves a lot of latitude for the commission or whoever the decision maker is to consider things.
So it's correct to say, which is what Norm said, that he filed his extension request prior to the adoption of the new policy, right? But it's also correct to say that there's nothing wrong with them being denied an extension, even if there was no policy. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. The decision maker, the planning commission has the authority to review things. They try to do, apply the same sort of criteria for consistency's sake, but the commission had been asking more and more questions of applicants, and staff had been requesting more information from applicants to try to substantiate what the basis was for extensions kind of leading up to this time.
Okay, and these are all great answers, by the way. Thank you very much. You're educating me. So hang on a second. I'm not done yet. But you can't have two CDPs on the same project. Could you address that for a second? Because I went and talked to Norm about his hotel project on the building behind it, but not on that building. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I really can't think of another circumstance other than the La Paz project and the Sycamore Village project, where in those two cases it was the exact same project. One was a 0.15 and one was a 0.20, and the 0.20 requires a certification by the Coastal Commission. And then the one would drop off and not be part of what we were dealing with any longer. Having two CDP applications, this one, already being approved, but then this hotel project at the same time, as far as I know, is really unprecedented. I mean, you might have a house and then a CDP later for a guest house or something like that, but two different projects that they can't coexist at the same time is a really unusual thing, and it leaves a lot of uncertainty for the community. I mean, can you imagine if every applicant had two different or more projects at the same time? It would be very strange.
Let me just throw in one more point, just to riff off of where she left that off. When we do environmental analysis to figure out what the cumulative impact of a new project is, one of the things that we have to look at are not only existing projects, but also what's been entitled. And so it affects more than just the individual property when you have a existing entitlement, because that entitlement has to be factored in as if it is built and is already generating that level of traffic. So it affects what can be done or realistically built in the neighborhood as well. And so there's kind of a dominoes effect. Remember, these are planning issues, not just entitlement issues. And that's one of the reasons why entitlements can't just last forever, because they're basically, checked a book out of the library, and eventually, you got to read it and either bring it back or, let it go, right? So that's the idea, that you've kind of created this reservation on the environmental impacts in your approved entitlement.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
And, regard also to what Christy just specifically said, I think that, the other thing that I wasn't really thinking about before is in this zone, right? And since the time when this was initially approved, while maybe the other, businesses across the street had been in the pipeline or they were working on their approvals and stuff, they weren't actually up and operating. And we as a council and a community all see the challenges related to traffic and impacts specifically in the area, in the vicinity of this property. One, due to the amount of beach traffic we see, but then also due to the amount of people that are visiting the business in the area, even at a time when the majority, or not maybe the majority, but many of the office buildings in the area are posting vacancy. So it's probably, the more that I think about it, wise for us at this time to deny this moving forward and say that that alone is a reason for us to say that the life of the project is gone so far, and that we need to look at all of the impacts in that area. And if this is the project that Mr. Haney wants to do that with all of these other things that are going on now, or if there's a different project that you want to come forward with it. I think that maybe, that's probably something that's important for us all to consider. I don't know, it's like a hard one, because I know that Mr. Haney's done so much work on this, and it's, the thing that Bonnie points out is that while it's not uncommon to have, 2 applications on one property, when it's in terms of a residential home, we want people to do a concurrent submittal that has the whole project at once, doesn't piecemeal it together with a guest house later on. Is that correct?
Well, my point was more that you could have, a CDP for a house that's done and then a CDP later for another project, but those can coexist on the site at the same time. In this case, it's going to be this one or that one, and you never know which one it's going to be.
And it sounds to me like knowing whether we would ever have the other one is probably something that we wouldn't know for a couple years. And that goes beyond even the time at which I would be looking at to consider giving the approval to start with construction. And we don't want to be in a situation whereby we have grading and drainage done and something that's sitting around for another 10 years.
That's a good point, because it does sound like you have 2 things you want to do with this property, and this one that you're seeking an extension on is kind of the hedging your bet thing if you don't get the big one done. I'm reading that right. And that's, I understand that. Is that right?
I want to bring you all back to the issue of due cause. That's what this is about.
More argument at this stage? I thought you had closed the hearing.
Yeah, okay, never mind. So, due cause. Let's talk about due cause. We've had a number of extensions along the way, right? So there was originally 2010 was approved, right? So in 2012, we got an extension, right? What was the due cause for that extension?
The reason for approving the time extension at the time was due to a lack of financing.
And that extension was for how long?
For 1 year.
And then another extension?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2 years. Another time extension was granted for 1 year in 2014 due to financing, and again in 2015 due to financing.
And
in 2016, a 1-year time extension was approved due to the requirement for additional geotechnical reports and financing.
That was in 2016?
It was approved in 2016, yes.
So 2016, the due cause was for financing and needing of geotechnical reports, with no mention of the architect who passed away in 2013?
No, the applicant submitted a thorough time extension request for the, in 2017, stating that the time extension request is due to the architect passing away, financing, the prospect of the hotel project, and the desire to seek a grading permit to demolish the gas station canopies. So that's for the time extension that we are reviewing tonight.
So due cause is not difficult to come up with, I would say, in general. I'm reading this history, right? You've already had your 2 cents. No, I didn't say you could speak.
Oh, you didn't say
No,
that?
I said
No,
that
I
you already
can't be
spoke.
recognized?
Yeah. Jefferson, you're being quiet.
Yeah, I'm interested because ultimately we'll have to get a zoning change here. And I was just curious if you've got any kind of support from the Coastal Commission. You mentioned, Norm, that you'd spoken to Jack Ainsworth, I believe. And I don't think you need to approach us, but I just wanted to know that we're still going to have that time element, as Skylar had mentioned, and that's more than enough ample time to get some kind of financing package together and get your ducks in a row, to put it bluntly. And but we're still going to be waiting on that extension and Coastal Commission. I mean, the zone change is timely. The last time we did a zone change was quite a while ago, as I remember.
Laura, you have a question?
Well, kind of a question comment. So, Bonnie, if we turn this down, Norm is still able to go forward with a separate application for the hotel, which would start with a zone text change, amendment, or change the zoning.
Those would be processed concurrently, the CDP application for the hotel and the zone change.
And my understanding is he could use a lot of the things that have already been approved for this, or he would have to start all over.
As he was mentioning, the geotechnical reports, the wastewater studies and things like that could all support the new project. But the exact design would have to be specific to the new hotel building.
And so let's say we turn it down, he goes forward with the hotel, he gets turned down for the hotel from either coastal or, because it would have to come to us and coastal. Well, first to coastal for a zone text change, and then to us, and then it could get appealed to coastal if we said yes. So if he gets turned down in that, he can't go back to, obviously, to this project, but he could put in and have to pay for all the other new stuff for a new
He could
project.
resubmit a new CDP for an office building or whatever other commercial use fits the zone.
But he'd have to pay all of the new fees and all of those kinds of things. He would be having to do that and submit for that project under all of the existing uses and anything else that has been done in that area, as Christy brought up, which to me is one of the most important things when looking at this and and addressing the due cause element of this. I think at this time I would make a motion to deny the appeal and not grant the extension, and encourage Mr. Haney to move forward with his ZTA, unless there's a way that we can do that whereby we say if you don't get to move forward, or if your zoning text amendment gets allowed, we'll agree to rehear the project. That all that would be doing would be just granting an extension. That's the same thing.
Well, but it would be an extension with conditions
hold
on it.
So you could put the conditions on that you have to, bring it up to the current traffic standard and all these things. It would just be a confusing disaster.
Well, and I also have concerns because I know there are other potential developments very near there that would be impacted by this too then, so.
Yeah, it's difficult. This is a difficult one because I kind of agree with Lou. It's like, hey, anything's better than what's there now, in a way. And this isn't like we're saving some pristine meadow that everybody loves to an evil developer. It's like, please do something with that. Yeah, I mean, so I'm actually kind of inclined to, it's like, yes, please, but it doesn't sound like you're going to build this thing, because it sounds like you're hedging your bet, and it all depends on the other project, so it's confusing. The hotel thing makes it a little confusing, I would say.
But the bottom line is if we approve this extension, those canopies are going down starting in 60 days. Is that what we're agreeing to? Because that's something that would be important to me.
Yeah, one more question. From the beginning, this is something that Pat Healy said in her letter, and she said when she spoke. She said the original approval was contingent on some conditions being met. What were those conditions that the original approval was contingent on?
Like any coastal development permit, there's a whole bunch of conditions. Do we have the original resolution attached here?
So it's not anything out of the ordinary that would happen normally?
No, it's just kind of the standard conditions.
I made a motion to deny it and to not grant the appeal and to not grant the time extension on this project.
Are we still open for a little bit of discussion? I was just curious on, because a lot of people haven't seen.
I will withdraw the motion.
Okay, just a second. I'm sorry, because I read Pat's letter, although I just got it 2 days ago or 3 days ago in the thing in the box. But I don't think that the general public is aware of some of the things that are in her letter. How do we inform people when it's so the focus of this is so acute and it affects all the people in the area, whatever project it is? How do we inform people? Is that something that we bring back at another date when we have more information? Because I only have Pat's 2-page letter here and the staff report, and then Norm's huge, voluminous expressions, and then the sequence of events. I find, and thank you for providing this, Norm, but I found that you left a number of things out, and I'd like to see a little more definition. I know it's difficult, and if I'm understanding it, how is the layman going to look at this?
Well, that's why you get paid the big bucks, you know. We've got all the information. You have what all of us has. You have the staff report. You have the supporting documentation of the appellant advocating for his position, and some of it in response to correspondence from Ms. Healy. So it's the difficult part of the job.
Okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different than what I did earlier. Would the council, in short of, it seems like there was no support for a motion to deny the request for the extension. So what if we did a limited request for an extension, and what would the conditions that the council would put on it? So I'm going to put forth.
Oh, hold on, because the conditions can't be related to the development. The issue before you is just whether or not you're going to extend it or not.
The existing project.
Right.
With no new conditions. We cannot
Right.
put any conditions on it at all.
Not on the new project. You can extend it for a year or 90 days
6 months or whatever.
6 months or, yeah, but you can't have, yeah, that's.
So, but the correct language that we would have to use is to extend it from what date on here? From June 1st, 2017.
Right.
Okay, so I would be pressed to extend the project. Would you want to extend the project for a year and a half from the June? Extend the project till however it gets us to December 31st of the end of this year. What?
18 months.
Is that something that
Is
you
that
guys
enough?
want a second for discussion?
Yeah, that sounds like something we could discuss.
That's 19 months.
My question for Christie within that is, what are the conditions that can we put any conditions on that extension to say you must do what? Or like, I don't really see that there's much leniency in that. It's just do it and you got to start by then.
You get to have until then to start,
And if you don't start, it expires.
unless you ask for and or receive another extension, right?
No.
But
We
if
put
it-
on there that you can't ask, this is final?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I wouldn't recommend it because, who knows what tomorrow brings.
If we grant this extension till December, the condition essentially would be that it would start between now and December. Is that right? Is that what we're talking about? That's the only, and basically the demolition would have to begin, et cetera, by then. And if it doesn't, then, then the extension expires. I think that makes sense.
That seems like a level playing field, because some of this, and I'm back to his due cause and Pat's claim about that there was no due cause. We did come up with a policy that said on a certain date we're going to start behaving this way, and he did come in that 2 weeks, I believe. Is that about right? Am I on the timing? That's why I refer back to the sequence of events.
Well, his application was done 6 months prior to the adoption of that policy, so it was one of those ones that was in the pipeline, and we did discuss that.
Yeah, and Lou had mentioned that. So trying to find an even course or a boundary that we can all work within is I think, what I'm trying to look for, and I'm looking to the council for additional input.
I think what we're discussing, bringing it to December, is a way to start it, which gives you another 6 months to start digging.
So my question within that motion for the applicant is, do you feel confident that you can do that? And because you clearly know that you're not going to have an answer from the Coastal Commission within 6 months as to whether or not you're going to go forward with the hotel, but you realize that in order to commence the project, there's, obviously the steps that are going to happen, within that, and we're very firm in that.
I will start construction well before December if this project is approved. And I will do everything in my power. Once I start construction, I will still want to come back to this planning commission as soon as I possibly can to move forward with the hotel, because that will benefit everyone. On the other hand, if for any reason it's not approved, I'm going to build this building. And it's going to be a vintage sports car museum, I hope. Thank you.
I have this weird gut feeling that I have a reluctance to do this, so I'm going to withdraw my motion. I'm going to come back with a motion that denies the project, because I think that Mr. Haney should come forth with the hotel, and that may be the way that he should go, and we'd be hearing that at a future time, and I don't see a vintage sports car museum being built there.
We keep talking, my car is going to be qualified for that vintage sports car museum.
Do I have any support to deny the extension for a vote, or no?
Then I'd like to make a motion, if you're not going to have a motion, to extend, to uphold this appeal and extend it till December 31st, 2018. I need a second for that.
I'll second it because I'd like to hear a vote. I mean, I'd like to see if we can get something, because it sounds like we're not, so we can move on, but it sounds like we're not getting something for the other one, so.
I'm just going to say, yeah, I mean, I understand. Norm, you know that I like you. You know that I think that you're an honest person and all that stuff. This is not anything to do with that, other than I'm making my suggestion that it be denied on what's best for the city. And what I see is what's best for the city is a project that comes forward, that looks at all of the different things that are there now and addresses them. And if it adds to the amount of, ways that visitors are served in our community in a better way than it can right now, maybe that's the best thing. But, I don't know if, based on the time and based on the due cause, and I've heard that, but this is since 2010. This is almost 10 years.
But I thought, well, this was put in a year ago, but, I mean, the extension was put in a year ago, but Skylar, or Bonnie, maybe you can, are we looking at for just this extension, because we're not looking at the project in itself, so should we be taking into account, because then I might change my second, of the project itself and the value to the community, or what, we might prefer to see, a car museum or a hotel, all that, or are we just looking at whether there is due cause to extend this? So that's why I just got confused, Skylar, with what you said.
Due cause is the issue that's raised by the applicant as to why he should be able to have the extension granted, when due cause is what's the element of the extension. What I'm raising is that due cause has already been raised 3 different times on occasion for this project. And if you take that into consideration and what the actual project is, and an applicant that's here that's saying, I'm concurrently going to be submitting for a boutique hotel, which the coastal commissions should grant zoning for, that if you take all of those things into consideration and the reality of what's going on the highway down there, you probably want to have another look at it. And you can't have it by granting this.
Does the coastal commission look at a stipulation from the city in part of its assembling a decision? Because the mention was made about Steve Ainsworth. If that's something he can procure, so that we see a definition and that burden is upon the applicant?
The coastal commission would have to approve certify any zone change on the property. At this point, it sounds like there have been verbal conversations that have been had, but I haven't had any myself, so I can't tell you anything today about whether that's likely or not. It sounds, I mean, a commercial visitor serving use is something the coastal commission is generally in favor of.
But just
we all know that.
For clarity, the coastal commission's role is only to certify LCP amendments that you adopt. So it starts here.
Yes, we fought hard for that.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Or
So actually, it's just for the amendment. It's not for any project. It would need to, go to the coastal, start here, go to the coastal commission for a zone change. Then there would need to be a project that would then come back and start at the planning commission and then the city council, and then could be appealed to the coastal commission.
Right, but the zone change and the CDP for the project could be processed concurrently, and the CDP could be contingent on the zone change getting certified ultimately.
That's if the applicant elects to submit concurrently. There's no requirement that he has to submit concurrently. Many would argue in the essence of time that may be a wise thing to do because of money, if you have the money to submit concurrently. But
The LCP amendments are not subject to CEQA. They're exempt, and development projects require environmental review, which is probably an EIR, so that would be why.
So, Laura, my point in this, if you look at this realistically, if Mr. Haney pushes forth to move with the boutique hotel, which is probably pretty wise for his investment, right? That the timeline for that is unknown, but realistically significantly beyond the time in which the existing property would be demoed and drainage would be installed, to the tune of probably a year or more. And then you don't even know if the applicant's going to continue with that or not. We have no guarantee of that right now. And we have someone that's saying, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to build this. But even looking at what the existing thing is for that property, this is 8 years later than when that was originally approved. And that's something that you have to consider when you're looking at this.
Right, and well, I think that therein lies the rub. And are we allowed to, I don't know who to ask, but are we allowed to condition that, let's say this goes forward and he gets an extra till the end of December and he is able to start his demo, can we condition that it has to look pretty? In other words, one of my concerns is that the drainage and the demo start, and then he's, so it's started, but then he really wants to do the hotel and it's going to look terrible for 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Flower garden? Ficus hedge? I mean.
I'm just asking.
Not the extension, the demo permit.
Yeah, the demo, any construction site is required to be secured, fenced, it's required to be.
It's a construction site. What are we going to expect here? This is, I mean, we have to be realistic. We cannot impose these things on. That is not fair. Call it what it is. It's going to be 2 green trees with an ugly canopy, or it's going to be dirt, maybe with some concrete or some gravel, for probably until we get something back from the coastal commission and our planning process. Probably going to take 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years. And I don't know. I'm very much reluctant to grant an extension knowing all that stuff at this point.
Do you have a motion, Skylar? Did you withdraw one? Did you put it back up again?
There's another motion that's on the table.
You can do an alternate motion.
My alternate motion is to deny the appeal of the project. I've stated it now. This is the 3rd time. for a second.
I'm going to second that one, and I'm going to go with the planning department's recommendation and the planning commission's recommendation. And based on everything we said, it's very difficult, but I'll second that.
Right, so we call, when you're ready, call the roll on the substitute motion first. So that would be to deny. And if that motion passes, we're done. If it fails, we'll go to the motion to go till December 31st.
Could we have a roll on the subsequent, or the replacement motion? Subsequent motion? Okay.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Mayor Mullen,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont,
No.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Yes.
Councilmember Wagner.
I want to abstain. I don't know where this is headed. I'm sorry. I apologize. I just think we have to have a little more in-depth. I apologize to my council members. I know it leaves us hanging. Sorry.
The motion carries.
I want to thank the City Council for spending as much time on this as you have. I'm disappointed in the vote, but I hope we can move forward with the hotel as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Norm, you're a good sport. It was not easy. It was one of the more difficult ones that was in front of us. Okay, we got 4B, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2018 and 19. And I have some comments on 4B. First is, well, the only one is Bert Ross, who gets 4 minutes. Oh, wait a minute, Bert, get staff report first. Sorry about that. I'm still getting the hang of this job. All right, Lisa.
Good evening, Mayor Mullen and Council. I'm here to present the proposed budget for you in its more finalized form. But first I do again want to thank staff, Ruth Pieman, Renee Neerman, Joni Hand, Pamela Romani, and all the department heads, and particularly really the finance staff and Ruth. We worked really hard after the last meeting 2 weeks ago to make all the changes and get this over to you. Is it going? It doesn't want to advance. Okay, here we go. So speaking of the changes, since you last saw this, we worked very hard to take into account all the revenue and expenditures for the current fiscal year so that we could better reflect all the amounts. And so we did everything through the end of May, so what you have in the budget now reflects that. And then the only other change can be found in the general fund grant awards, and those were the changes that you requested at the May 29th hearing. So we added the Malibu Dolphin Charitable Foundation as a recipient and awarded them $1,000, and then the grant amounts for the Aurelia Foundation, the Children's Life Saving Foundation, the Malibu Community Labor Exchange, and the Malibu Jewish Center and Synagogues Hand in Hand program were all increased per your request. And so of the $100,000 that were allocated for the general fund grant programs, now we have $89,500 that has been awarded, so that still leaves $10,500 available for disbursement at a later time during the fiscal year. So as we've refined the numbers, the proposed budget anticipates ending the current fiscal year with a general fund grant undesignated reserve of $32.4 million. So it's actually slightly higher than we had been anticipating previously. So now that would be 106% of the annual general fund operating budget. So we were at 102%, and now we're just doing that much better. And again, this slide reflects the use of $12 million of the undesignated general fund reserves and $1 million of designated general fund reserves to fund the land acquisition in fiscal year 2018-2019. This leaves a projected balance of $20.2 million, which is a 66% reserve. This percentage is, again, over the council policy requiring a 50% reserve, and it maintains that 66% that our rating agencies have said is necessary to maintain the highest rating. So again, looking at our revenues for 2018-2019, the city anticipates receiving $77.5 million of revenue, which includes $31.2 million of general fund revenue. And again, looking at the breakout, the property taxes account for 40% of the general fund revenues. And again, that's based on the city's assessed property values of $15.8 billion. The other major tax revenue sources are sales tax, utility users tax, and transient occupancy tax. Sales tax is at 12% of the general fund revenue for a total of about $3.8 million of expected revenue in the coming year. Licenses and permits and service charges are the other next two largest sources of revenue, both at about 10% each of the revenue. The proposed expenditure budget is based, again, on our council priorities and approved work plan. The work plan for 2018-2019 is attached at the end of the budget and details the city's priorities and which departments will address them. The city has a balanced general fund budget for fiscal year 2018-2019, which means that ongoing operating expenses do not exceed the annual general fund revenue for the year. Ongoing operating expenses are projected at $30.4 million and are consistent with the projected general fund revenue amount of $31.2 million. Total expenditures are projected at $91.1 million. The general fund expenditure budget is $44.9 million, which includes both ongoing operating expenditures, capital improvement projects, and a portion of the land acquisition. That's the $13 million that we are taking from the general fund undesignated and designated reserves. The remainder of the land acquisition can be found in the special revenue expenses, and Legacy Park project fund expenses are budgeted at $2.2 million for the coming year. If we look at the general fund operating expenditures by department, we can see that the city's largest general fund expense is public safety at $8.4 million, which makes up 30% of the budget. This is followed by management and administration at $7.9 million, $3.6 million for ESD, $3.1 million for community services, $3.1 million for planning, and $2 million for public works. The ongoing debt service on bonds was not included in these totals, and that's about $2.1 million. When we look at the coming year's breakdown of total expenditures, you can see that we have 47% of that budget is going to the land acquisition. 22% goes to operating and maintenance costs, 17% to personnel, 10% to capital projects, and 9% to public safety. When you look at that same breakdown just on the general fund You see that operations and maintenance expenses are at 40%, personnel at 30%, public safety at 26%, and capital projects at 4%. The proposed budget includes $9.4 million for capital projects. The majority of the city's capital projects will be funded from $830,000 of state revolving fund loans, $450,000 from grants, $5.6 million of Los Angeles County Measure R and Measure M funding, and $900,000 of special revenue. The General Fund Capital Improvement Project Reserve will provide $1.4 million of the funding. The proposed budget includes funding for 80 full-time employees, the equivalent of 13 employees working as part-time staff, and the equivalent of 4 employees working as student interns. The state Now I'm going to talk about our appropriations limit, and the state constitution requires that the city establishes a limit on what amount of taxes can be spent each year. That limit is based on an amount that was set in the 1970s and is adjusted for inflation and changes to population. For next year, the city's limit is $26 million. And the proposed budget in front of you includes $24.5 million of revenue subject to that limit. Therefore, the budget is $1.5 million under the established limit. The proposed budget anticipates a starting general fund undesignated reserve of $32.4 million and an ending reserve amount of $20.2 million. The total of all funds at the beginning of the fiscal year will be $42.7 million, and the ending balance is projected to be $29.1 million. The recommended action before you tonight is to approve the council priorities and departmental tasks for fiscal year 2018-2019 and to adopt 3 resolutions, 18-31, which adopts the annual budget, 18-32, approving the authorized positions and salary ranges for the coming year, and Resolution 18-33, establishing the appropriations limit. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Do you have any questions?
Public comment.
Oh, and now we have public comment. Bert, you're up, followed by Mary Ann Riggins.
A quick aside for my prepared remarks. The woman who called you all cowards was outrageously out of order, and if you want to know what a coward is, it's a person who makes personal attacks and then hightails it out without giving any of you a chance to defend yourselves. Anyway, my prepared remarks on the budget. Mayor Mullen, members of the City Council, my name is Bert Ross, and I'm a member of the Malibu Task Force on Homelessness, as well as a member of the Advisory Board for the City's Strategic Plan for Homelessness, on homelessness, I'm sorry. I'm here tonight to congratulate all of you for your strong support for our homeless people as manifested by the inclusion of $200,000 in the city's proposed public safety budget. This is, to the best of my knowledge, the first time in our city's history that money has been allocated as a line item in our budget to deal exclusively with our homeless population. Over 2 years ago, the Malibu Task Force on Homelessness was formed for the explicit purpose of raising the monies needed to fund the pilot program, in which 2 professional outreach workers employed by the people concerned would work full-time in Malibu in order to link our neediest neighbors with housing and critical support services. Because of the tremendous generosity of this city government, the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation, and numerous individuals, business owners, and local religious and civic organizations, the task force has already raised over $500,000. It has always been our hope that if this pilot program were a success, the City of Malibu would take over its funding, ensuring the sustainability of these efforts. That is precisely what you are making possible with this budget. The simple fact is the pilot program has been an undisputed success. In only 20 months, 48 of Malibu's homeless people who were engaged by the People Concerns Outreach Team have found either permanent or interim housing. 48 people going to sleep tonight with roofs over their heads. Many more have been helped by a full range of services, including substance abuse treatment, weekly street-side medical and psychiatric care, and so much more. In addition, I'm happy to share with you the results of this year's count on homeless people in Malibu, which were officially announced by the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority earlier today. From January 2017 to January 2018, the estimated homeless population in Malibu dropped from 180 individuals to 155 individuals, a 14% drop. By supporting the People's Concerns' tireless efforts to help our homeless neighbors become housed, healthy, and safe, we in Malibu, who do care about the neediest amongst us, are collectively making a significant difference. With the city's approval of this budget tonight and of the strategic plan on homelessness in the weeks ahead, the citizens of Malibu can be confident that our city government is working to compassionately and effectively address the needs of our homeless population, while at the same time addressing the public safety concerns affecting the community at large. You on this council who serve our community do many things which help people who live here, but it is truly extraordinary when you do something which actually saves lives. By the actions you are taking to fund the Malibu Outreach Team and related services provided by the People Concerned, you are literally saving the lives of extremely vulnerable people, many of whom you will never even know. I thank you tonight in their behalf. There will always be naysayers, people who complain that you are doing too little, too much, doing it the wrong way, and so on. There will always be those who curse the darkness and others who will light a candle. Thank you for lighting a candle. Thank you.
Excellent use of your time, Bert. You nailed it. That's pretty good stuff. Thank you for your comments. Marianne, you're up.
I would congratulate all the efforts on that also. First thing I want to say is, once again, can we work on street lighting in the city of Malibu and try and improving, not the intersection lighting, but the actual lighting of the different poles that are out there for our highways and our public streets. It needs to be improved. It needs to come into conformance with our dark skies ordinance that you passed recently so that we can have good lighting throughout the city. The second one I have, I want to congratulate staff. Great job on the budget. Lots of hard work, and you know, it's just another testament to the city of how well the staff works. And that kind of brings me, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a little time for a soapbox. As a resident, I read a lot of stuff in this community about this city. It's very disappointing. It's very disappointing to look out here and not see one person who has been criticizing how money is spent in this city here watching this budget presentation or knowing anything about this. And also talking about how bloated government is within our city. And I would just like to ask them, what would you get rid of? Do we stop taking care of our streets? Do we stop providing services in our building safety department or our planning department? Do we stop having a community service department that is growing by leaps and bounds, servicing our seniors and our kids and every other person within our community with great programs? Would we stop supporting the homeless that are living amongst our community and not having a roof over their head that are still part of our fabric of our community? So I apologize for taking my time like that. I just want to congratulate you and thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Very nice words. Bert, let me make a comment. I'll steal the mic here for a second. Bert, thank you very much for your comments. You guys, not just you, but everybody else got the ball rolling well before we got involved. And I think that the credit goes to all of you who did what was necessary on your own, raised the money yourselves, took action, fashioned a team, got the outreach workers out there, and you did, you know, exactly what was needed to be done to enable us to walk into a situation where it was already functioning. and that makes it super easy for us. We didn't have to invent the wheel. There are, of course, a lot more aspects to the homeless thing, and I think the efforts will only improve over time, and not just here, but the state is, should be putting more resources toward it. It's super difficult and challenging thing for everybody in the state of California, but it's nice of you to come down here and thank us, but we should be thanking you. And I really appreciate the leadership that comes from the community, and that's what America's all about, citizen volunteers seeing something that needs to be done, getting together, getting the resources, getting in touch with the expert agencies, getting the outreach workers here. And as you know, I did do a day walking with our Alex and Alex. They're on the tip of the spear, and we're super fortunate to have those two, and they're doing a great job, and I encourage everybody else to take a day out of your lives and go do what they do. But thank you for taking the point, and your team, I know it's not just you, on this issue, very difficult issue, and enabling us to walk into a situation where we could actually be of service and pick up the ball after the ball was handed to us, literally handed to us. So thanks very much. So I'll open up the comment from the council for anything having to do with the budget or any of the comments. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I wanted to say something similar. First, I think it's extraordinary that you waited 3 hours to say something nice. Most of the time, people will wait 3 hours to, criticize or tell us something else. So I wanted to thank you and Joan, because I know how much you have worked on this, as well as many other individuals that I know weren't able to stay that I saw earlier. And I remember when you first started to raise money for this, for the task force, and you said to me, well, eventually I really want the city to take this over. And I said, well, that would be great. And, people say that government works slowly, and it took less than 5 years, which means that government is working really swiftly. So I consider it my honor, my obligation to take this on, and you have certainly laid the groundwork for it. So as the mayor said, I am extremely appreciative of that for both of you, Joan and Bert, and everybody else that I know is no longer here that worked on that. And the other thing, thank you, Marianne. I think that it's so much easier to criticize and say, well, this is too much or things should be done, than to really take the time to investigate. And a lot of times we don't have the time or the expertise. And I think you raise a very interesting question about what would you cut. And I think that we have grown so much, and what we offer to our community has grown so much that people don't realize that costs money, and that we are providing so much more. And I've said it up here before, when my kids, and they're only in their 20s, when they were young, we didn't provide any sports programs through the city. Basketball was private, everything was private. And now we provide all of those through middle school. And that's just one very, very small example. We had a very, very, very limited seniors program. And now that, serves hundreds of people. So I welcome people to get in touch with Lisa or to look at this very detailed report, because I think it's, I thank you again, as I have for the other times you presented it. So I think there's a lot of good information in here. And I will move to adopt resolution 1831, 1832, and 1833.
I'll second it. I'd like to comment also. I just also want to thank Bert again. Getting involved in this was the second best thing you've done since convincing Joan to marry you. That's number one, because none of this would have happened without it. And I wanted to thank you and Marianne for actually saying nice things to us, where there's 2 city council candidates in the audience, and I want you to see that actually sometimes people say nice things about us as well. Just thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to thank our staff and thank the members of this community for making Malibu an awesome place. And we'll keep doing our job.
Jefferson, anything?
Let's pass it.
Okay, I just want to make a comment about, thank you, Lisa, for this presentation. Thank you, Reba, for running a tight ship and making sure that we've been fiscally responsible. I've said this before, but we wouldn't have been in a position to make this, take advantage of this historic opportunity for the property acquisition that we're finalizing if we didn't run a tight ship and make sure that we prudently looked out for the taxpayers' money and use it effectively and plan for not only a rainy day but for the untimely appearance of Mr. Murphy, well and above and beyond the call of what was needed on our unusually high standards, but it put us in a great position, and we couldn't have done it if we didn't have you fine professionals taking care of the money of the city. So thanks very much. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. And now we're on to 6A. Report on the plastic bottle ban. Craig George.
Good evening, Mayor Mullen, City Council. Back in October of last year, there was a discussion at a City Council meeting in regards to some of the successful plastic bans the city's been adopting, and Council talked briefly about talking about plastic water bottles and plastic bottles in general, but it was not on the agenda, so Council directed staff to bring back the topic, so it is on the agenda so that we can openly discuss the item. So what staff is here tonight for is just to bring up a couple things to council and then seeking direction of where council wants to go with this issue. We've had a lot of success with the strong cutlery bans, the sandbag bans, and all of the other plastic bans that we've done. One of the other things that we can consider is some form of plastic bottle ban. And so what staff is asking council is to consider, do you want to move forward with some kind of a plastic bottle ban at this time? Do you want to direct staff to come back in the future to see how the landscape on plastic bottles, both nationally and locally, change? If we want to consider a plastic bottle ban, should it be exclusive to water bottles only, or should it be all plastic bottles that we are considering? There's a lot of things, good pros and cons for both. Also, if we want to move forward with any kind of a plastic water bottle ban or plastic bottle ban, should there be some kind of a size threshold that's assigned to that, such as anything smaller than a liter bottle should be banned? And then one of the last things that staff recommends and council should consider, if there is some form of a ban, it should really be exclusive to city properties only at this time and city events. But with that being said, staff is just seeking direction from council of how they would like to move forward with this topic, if they want to do that at all. So I'm open for any kind of discussion and direction council wishes to give to staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Skylar, I'm sensing an itchy finger.
I asked.
And we do have one public speaker, that's Pat Healy, so probably should get up here. Pat, you here? Come on up. And then we'll go to comments. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jefferson.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to add my support for a single-use plastic water bottle ban of the small, I guess it's 1 liter bottles, I don't know, but the small ones. These plastic bottles are a major cause of ocean pollution, harming our marine life, and a major cause of adding trash to our landfills. People can change their addiction to these single-use plastic water bottles, and new habits can be formed. People can start using refillable bottles, and whether they be made of glass or aluminum or stainless steel. So new habits should be created for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Skylar?
Thank you, Mayor. I sent a photo to our technicians, and I'm hoping they can bring an image that was recently seen on the cover of National Geographic. And I would remind this council that it was 10 years ago, approximately, when we addressed something called the plastic bag. And if you look at that, which hopefully will come up shortly, what you will see is an image that looks like a glacier at first, and then you realize that it's actually a plastic bag. So what I would appreciate Craig for bringing this back to us, and I think that this city, in continuing to be a leader in addressing these kinds of things, ought to consider, and maybe it's phased, but a option to move forward that combines 1, 2, and 3 on a citywide level. And I know that that's a bold step, but there are alternatives that are readily available. We have drinking fountain stations. I know the county has them at the beach. People do carry water, reusable items. And if we can encourage people to use glass and bring their own water bottle, maybe, I don't know, that I've seen some different paper-based options. There's obviously aluminum, and people don't think of getting water in an aluminum can, but it does exist. They serve it to you oftentimes on an airplane. And those are things that people are raising issues about vending machines. How can you get water out of a vending machine? You can get canned water out of a vending machine very effectively. And I think that it's sort of broader than just pinpointing water. I say that only because I received a letter, I think we all received a letter from one of the beverage associations. There's the image, you'll see it on the screen behind me, whereby they don't want water to be singled out. So in keeping with that and not singling out water, I would like to, see us address all of the plastic beverage items. That may be even way more bold than the council's willing to go right now, but I think it, just to be fair to them and to be fair to the Beverage Association, that we see this plastic throughout our city, displayed and distributed, not only in the beach, not only in streams or things like that, but along the highway and along, in our landfills. And then, there's the argument for everything to be recycled. But I see our sheriff is, departing the room because he doesn't want to be seen with his plastic bottle. But I don't know. I just think that there's a way for us to encourage people to do that and to remove those kind of products from the shelf. The same way that we removed, the distribution of a plastic bag to everyone, and that we've, people thought that we wouldn't be able to have people use paper straws, but they're using alternatives to plastic, and they exist. So those are my initial comments.
Thank you, Skylar. Laura.
Thank you. So I don't think I've ever had water in aluminum. Have I? I mean, I've never seen it distributed.
Dasani makes it, so that means Pepsi.
Oh, really? So we're not talking about if I bring, because it really doesn't consider a ban of packaged water. This ban will prohibit any type of packaged water from being distributed. So what you're saying is that if we couldn't give out glass bottles of water here, then?
I think that this is the item 3, and in what's in parentheses there, I know that in regards to our city, and that would include the different items. I mean, maybe number 3 is not the one that we want to put the emphasis on. I think the emphasis is probably more on 1 and 2, and then on a citywide level, and saying that we would not like to see those items sold at the grocery store. So, it's very.
But I guess what I was saying was number 3 didn't say single use. So I get, because there are a lot of reusable bottles.
I don't think that it has to necessarily say single use, but it can.
Well, totally. No, what I'm saying is that you can go and buy a reusable water bottle, you know, with like the plastic around it and stuff so that you could, you know, reuse it. So that's all I'm just saying. That, we're talking about single use, the ones that you just use once and throw away. So, I mean, I definitely would support not just water, but soda and those kinds of things on city properties. And I mean, a long time ago, and I did it more, not only for the plastic, but also for the cost, like at a party or something like that, it's a lot cheaper to buy a big bottle of soda than all those little individual ones that people take 2 sips and then they throw away. That, you know, is really wasteful. And I know that we don't do that at the city anymore. Anyway, so I would support 1 and 2. I just have, I think it would be a good start. I'm not saying I don't support 3, but I guess I would need to know a little bit more about the packaged water and what else is available. So I think starting with 1 and 2 would be a really good way to begin.
I would just add in that I think that we should look at, you know, if that phasing in that on a citywide level. I mean, we don't, the problem has not always been someone at a city-owned facility where there's 3 trash receptacles and they're readily available in a bunch of places. You know, the problem becomes the private events, the movie sets, the beach use, right? The amount of visitors, you know, the majority of the visitors that visit our community come for the beach, right? And we don't even have recycling on the beach, right? So if it's, you know, we can encourage people to reuse their water bottle. One way to do that is to encourage, you know, drinking fountains and those kind of things like that. But I don't want to seem like we're like completely overbearing, but there's clearly a message here that's bold.
Lou?
I'm thinking it might be just a little too bold. I think the concept works, and I think we should start it, and if we should do it at city-owned facilities and see how it works, and if it does, then expand it. And it's just, I think when you start to take giant bites out of it, it's very hard to digest. Take a little bit at a time, people get used to it, and it becomes a way of life. And that's how I would approach it.
Jefferson?
Part of the success of these kinds of bans is when we educate during the process of ultimately headed to the path that you desire. And it's like school. First grade is the basics. By the time you're in 12th grade, you got it down. So if we do this in steps and we propose this and we can come up with some kind of step program, as Lou had just mentioned, I would really encourage that, because then we become a leader in a field that will be very seriously a big part of the environment in the future for future generations. And then we get a chance to educate on the way out. And it's worked well on the straws. We already have input. Solid paper doesn't work as well as waxed. I mean, we're hearing the things people don't like the first bite with the wood. Okay, the second bite is fine. So let us discover this. Let us move it forward. Let us educate. And that's how I feel about it. And I'm with you on this. I just like to do it so that we can absorb it as we go along.
I would propose at this time that we move to impose this on ourselves and remove the single-use plastic beverages from our city facilities and make that a requirement of any permit that's issued for any facility that they don't use that. That would include film sets and those kind of things. And maybe the timeline for that is, you know, I mean, the goal would be to do that by the end of the year. Was that realistic, Christy?
Yes, it's realistic. So your direction is to bring back an ordinance that accomplishes that, right?
Can I ask a question about that? So if you're saying anything that the city gives a permit, so then you're saying if somebody gets a TUP for a wedding or something that they couldn't do that. So at the beaches, I guess we do building permits so they couldn't have So I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just talking about enforcement. That it might be, I mean, I think education is obviously going to be a big part of this, but I would hate for somebody's wedding at, you know, your house, let's say somebody rented your house, and then, you know, the code enforcement comes in and says, stop this wedding because you have plastic. I mean, I agree with it. I just hope that we can be more educational rather than punitive and really, that's all.
I think that the goal in this is to get people and to work on education, as Jefferson said. I think that when somebody comes to come and get a permit for this kind of thing and they're made aware of it, you know, I mean, are you really going to fight the city on saying I have to use plastic water for my event? And if you do that, then, you know, that's shame on you. I mean, that's really lame. Knowing that there's other alternatives that are out there that you can use paper cups and have larger bottles if you need to, distribute it that way, or have a drinking fountain, or have like a larger. Yeah, and that's in regards to construction sites. I mean, you can have a large thing of water, but most of the guys that are working there bring the 1 liter thing anyways.
Quite often on productions, which I do a lot of, you'll see a master container, 5-gallon igloo with designation on it, fresh ice in it, paper cups nearby. And that kind of behavior I'm seeing more and more often rather than the plastic bottles. So in the industry I'm active in, we see it on the set. There's one set I was on at Avatar, and it's all of what you would like and what I enjoyed being a part of. So there are avenues that we can follow to make this happen and educate on the way. So I'm in support of some kind of work on this.
Maybe we can.
Can I get a word in edgewise? Thank you very much. I agree with Jefferson about the education thing. Very important. I've done a lot of interviews recently about the straw ban. Everyone's interested in it. Everyone wants to know. And the thing that I keep saying is it's not only good for our town, it's good for raising awareness. And it's, as much as I don't like to use the name of our town for political things, I think this is one of those things that's good for something in our town and something that is applies everywhere. So I agree with Jefferson, though. I think we should prepare the battlefield, so to speak, and educate people on what's coming. Because this is a little more significant, and the straw thing was significant enough, but this is going to be a little more significant to make a citywide thing. So, you know, what I would say is the city-owned thing can happen really fast. Then the next thing maybe shouldn't be the permitting thing, it should be citywide to include permitted things. And that should have a time frame that we consider during which time we consider doing pretty significant education, public education, and outreach programs. That sound like what you're talking about?
So, Christy, in terms of the formality with something like this, in imposing that on ourselves, and then sort of being formal with that through that process, the timeline on that would be approximately 3 to 6 months for us hearing the ordinance and those kind of things, or do we have to just, as a policy, just do it?
We can, any way you want it, yeah.
Okay, and then.
I mean, how long will it take formally to adopt a policy? Okay, so you can let your city manager know right now that that's what you don't expect to see any more plastic bottles in your own events. And then
she understands that.
We can bring back, a policy, which is a resolution which will take effect immediately at the available agenda.
So I don't know if there's any other time, Reva, that's needed to do that on city-owned facilities?
That's been happening probably for 2 years now. There are no plastic bottles in City Hall, on city facilities. If there's a city-hosted event or an opening event or anything like that, we don't use bottles, so that's already in place.
So if we have that in place, then maybe the thing to do is to come back with the education package and ordinance that can get something like this in place within the next 6 months to a year, I would say, though, so that by, I guess, the goal would be that by the spring of next year, that those are off the shelf.
I think that's a worthy goal. And do other towns do this?
The other towns that consider the bans are on their city properties. There's a couple other governmental agencies, National Park Service, that have banned them in specific parks for sale, but it's always limited to the facility itself and not the entire city or the entire organization. And personally, I think that's a good place to start with City Hall. And as Reva mentioned, we have the water bottle filling stations. ESD has given every staff member a refillable water bottle and utensils and everything else. So we do comply for the most part here at City Hall. We'll just have to reach out to
the Sheriff's Department.
And also, so this would be at Bluffs Park, this would be at Legacy, I mean, this would be at all city-owned, and, well, I don't think we give out anything at Trancas right now.
I want to clarify that you're asking to stop selling plastic bottles on city facilities, correct?
I'm asking to stop selling and using them and not encouraging the use of them on our city facilities at all, which I know that we're not doing right now. But let's say that we have somebody that comes to use our facility here or use Bluffs Park, right? I would very much like us to make it a part of that agreement and conditional permit for that's not taking place.
So how about if we do something like that, you know, we've already not been using them for city-hosted events. Do we allow people that rent out our facility to use them, Reva?
I don't believe there's anything in writing with that, so we can certainly start with that, and I can work with the city attorney if that needs to come back to the council, if it's something we can just add to our permits.
And then, you know, maybe, you know, have that, you know, 3 months later, and then 3 months after that, or 6 months after that, we do, and any permitted, anything that needs a permit from the city, like a TUP or the Guitar Festival or whatever it is, the chili cook-off. And then after that would be a citywide ban of selling them. So I think if we do them in those steps, first, all, you know, city facilities, even if you're renting city facilities, then if you get a permit from city facilities, then, what?
Then off the shelf.
Then off the shelf. So, you know, and we can be educating throughout that whole time.
Yeah, and I think that I would like the council, I'm curious to see timetable-wise, but does the, you know, spring of next year from now, is that a realistic, you guys comfortable with that time period to, you know, to do outreach and get to a place where we're not having it on the shelf?
I'm comfortable, but I'd like to get, you know, some feedback from this, when the staff report comes back, kind of sniffing around as to if there's lawsuits lurking from the beverage community, you know what I mean, beverage manufacturers, and if other municipalities have done this, just what the lessons learned are from them, just so we know what waters we're heading into.
So Christy, do we need to do anything else on that, or is that good for now? Cool.
Do you understand that?
Loud and clear.
Okay, do I have a second?
I think we're good.
I knew that. Okay, we are on to item 7 alpha. Assembly Bill 2369, fishing violations within a marine protected area. Support, Councilmember Peak. Would you like to speak on this one?
Mayor, it's pretty self-explanatory. It really just increases the penalties for people that are conducting illegal activity in the marine protected areas. A lot of outreach has been done and whatnot. And, you know, there's not a ton of enforcement by the Department of Fish and Wildlife like, for example, they're giving speeding tickets on PCH, but we want to encourage good behavior, and this is something that was actually brought to me by a member of the National Resources Defense Council, and because we have some significant MPLAs here in this area, I thought it'd be something we ought to support.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Yeah, well,
Aye.
Wait, we have discussion.
Aye.
Go.
okay.
Too late.
I was just, I agree, I support it. And somewhere we have to understand that Fish and Wildlife has really short resources for defending these MPAs. I think somewhere along the line we need to educate the public to look for the CF numbers and the commercial fishing license numbers on these vessels that are close, like Malibu Road last month, 20 to 30 vessels, some of them not in compliance, some of them in compliance. And that was brought to me by a number of the people on Old Malibu Road. I kept all the data. Those are the kinds of things as we as council members have to reach out to the community, because they will be our eyes and ears on the defense of what you're asking. So I'll work on that with you, on how to outreach to the public to be our eyes and ears.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn in memory of Griff Snyder.
Okay. I second that. All in favor?
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
We are adjourned.